Chapter 908. The immortal child naturally could not tell what Feng Xinjian was thinking about. He asked directly, "Brother Feng, have you heard about the recent matter regarding the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures?" Feng Xinjian said, "I know a little. Could it be that the immortal child knows about the inside story?" The immortal child smiled. "It's a long story. Brother Feng, do you know that among the three saints, the extraordinary Sun is in charge of criminal law, Seiko Kaitian is in charge of preaching, and what I'm in charge of is the historical records and the understanding toward the teachings?" Feng Xinjian nodded slightly. Each of the three saints was in charge of different areas. Regardless of whether it was criminal law, preaching, history, or teachings, they were all extremely important and had great authority. This was also the reason why the three saints had been in a stalemate for many years without a victor being decided. 1,000 years ago, 7 heaven-supporting demons came from the western land and brought about an overwhelming massacre. In the end, the strongest Tulip dynasty contacted the 3 strongest experts in the world, Saint Adam, the god of fear Dante, and the current pope. They joined forces to seal the 7 heaven-supporting demons one by one. The immortal child sighed and said, "In order to prevent the seals from being broken, making it impossible for anyone to find and break the seals on them, the 3 experts sealed off all information. However, just in case, the Pope also left behind a backup plan. Once the seals show signs of breaking, I, the saint who is in charge of history, will receive a warning." As he spoke, the white robe he was wearing trembled slightly, and streams of golden words floated out from his long robe. The white robe that the immortal child was wearing was not an ordinary item either. It was a level 35 divine remains equipment, and it was said to have recorded all the secrets and history of the Holy Sea of Truth, the Samsara robe. This long robe was in charge of recording history and interpreting the teachings. It was said that the golden runes on the long robe recorded the history of the entire world from the beginning of the world to the present. Right now, the words that the immortal child was displaying were regarding the history of the 7 heaven-supporting demons. Once the 7 seals showed signs of weakness, the Samsara robe displayed a piece of history from 1,000 years ago. These 7 people are known as the Quanji 7 people. They are all perfect and have the foundation of the Great Tao. According to the records, these 7 people came from the Western land and are very likely to be the successors of the Divine Sun Emperor. And the reason why they came to our side is to search for the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. Hearing the amount of information, Feng Xinjian's gaze flickered. The Divine Sun Emperor went to the Western land. And those 7 people are still alive after more than 1,000 years? To us, the Western continent is an upper realm. The immortal child said, "The experts there have the means to increase their lifespans. Therefore, when some divine-level experts feel that their lifespans are about to come to an end, they head out to search for the Western land. As for those 7 people, they've only managed to survive in the seal because they've mastered the method of converting their lifespan and strength." "Search?" Feng Xinjian said. "Is it very difficult to find the Western land?" The immortal child smiled, looked at Feng Xinjian, and said, "Since you're from Earth, you should know that although the way to return to your world is through the sea, your world isn't actually in our sea. It's the same logic for the Western land. If you head toward the Western Sea from here, there'll be an overlapping space, and you'll be able to reach the Western land. However, that stretch of space will disappear and reappear at irregular intervals. It's not easy to discover." A hint of comprehension flashed in Feng Xinjian's eyes. He finally understood what the Western land was all about. To ordinary Westerners, it was true that they had taken a big ship and crossed the sea to arrive at Miracle World. However, it was the same as Demonic City. They had traveled from one world sea to another world sea. It was just that there was a small area of overlap between the 2 world seas. However, these 7 people thought that they came from the higher realm and didn't care about the living beings in this land at all. The moment they arrived, they stirred up bloodshed. This was why they were attacked and then sealed, the immortal child said. However, it's because they've mastered the method of converting their lifespan and strength that they're able to keep on depleting their strength and maintaining their lifespans while they're sealed. 1,000 years have passed, and their strength has probably reached its lowest point. Fang Xinjian asked directly, "What do you want to do?" "I want to make use of them to find the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures," the immortal child said. The Immortality Saint said, "The 7 experts at Tier 6 of the divine level and above are at their weakest moment. This is a rare opportunity. It's because once they're sealed again, we won't have any chance to communicate with them." Fang Xinjian narrowed his eyes and said, "You want them to break out of the seal and follow their traces to find the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures." The immortal child smiled and said, "There's 7 experts after all. Although they're weak now, we can't underestimate them. Brother Fang, it's a little too risky for you to do this. My plan is to send people to isolate 6 of the seals and prevent them from breaking out. Meanwhile, the 2 of us will go all out to kill one of them and force them to reveal the location of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures." "That works." Fang Xinjian nodded in agreement. "But as you said, the other party is an expert at Tier 6 of the divine level and above after all. If you and I can step into Tier 6 of the divine level, it'll be safer for us to take action. If we can step into Tier 6 of the divine level, it'll naturally be easier to deal with them. If we can then find the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures, we'll really be able to suppress the extraordinary Sun and Seiko Kaitian," the immortal child said. "However, it's extremely difficult to reach Tier 6 of the divine level. If we're the slightest bit careless, we'll die. Before I'm completely confident, I won't try to transcend it." Fang Xinjian fell silent for a few seconds before saying, "I have an idea that can allow us to step into Tier 6 of the divine level faster." With that, Fang Xinjian sent the double moon's projection technique to the immortal child with a single thought. After all, before the other 2 saints were wiped out, it was impossible for him and the immortal child to become enemies. Moreover, the 7th onslaught would arrive in slightly over a year's time. Based on his recorded lifespan, he was only left with 1 year and 3 months. Fang Xinjian no longer had time to squander. Therefore, he wanted to make the best use of his time and strive for Tier 6 of the divine level together with the immortal child. With the restrictions of the contract, he would at least not have to worry that the other party would betray him. After receiving the information from the double moon's projection, the immortal child's eyes gleamed. "To think that there's such a secret technique to transcend the tribulation? Excellent, excellent, excellent. With this secret technique, the 2 of us will have a 100% chance of striving for Tier 6 of the divine level together. There's no time to lose. We should make arrangements for this breakthrough as soon as possible. I need 7 days' time to make arrangements for the church's matters." Fang Xinjian gave it some thought before replying, "Then let's strive for Tier 6 of the divine level together in this place 7 days later." These 7 days were just nice for the divine level experts under him to strive for successive breakthroughs. After he left, they would be able to hold down the fort in the Empire. Chapter 909. The immortal child said, "We mustn't stop with the 7 seals either. I'll settle the 4 in the north and leave the 3 in the south to you. Send people to stop people from exploring the seals and prevent them from escaping. We'll deal with these 7 demons after we attain Tier 6 of the divine level." After the meeting at Wolf's Howl Mountain, Fang Xinjian immediately returned to the imperial capital's palace and summoned the 6 divine level experts under him. Looking at the 6 people before him, Fang Xinjian said, 7 days later, I'll enter seclusion to strive for Tier 6 of the divine level." Hearing his words, everyone present was slightly surprised. Prince Philip was the first to say, "Xinjian, Tier 6 of the divine level is no small matter. Countless geniuses in history have fallen at this step. You've just attained Tier 5 of the divine level. Aren't you a little too anxious to strive for it again 7 days later? The fourth prince also said, right now there's no one who has stepped into tier 6 of the divine level in this world. Xinjiang, there's no need for you to be in such a hurry. You can try to strive for it after your preparations are complete. Right now, Fang Xinjiang could be said to be the entire empire's pillar and the strongest expert in the south. Everyone present was naturally unwilling to see anything happen to Fang Xinjiang. I've made up my mind. However, Fang Xinjiang said directly, I have 100% confidence in making a breakthrough this time around. Before I enter seclusion, you guys must use the twin moons projection to clear the trials in groups over the next 7 days to increase your strength. You'll be able to help me hold down the fort in the empire while I'm not around. With that, Fang Xinjiang sent the church's secret technique for clearing the trials to the snap of fingers into the minds of the 6 people present with a single thought. Since Fang Xinjiang had already made up his mind, everyone understood that it was impossible for them to persuade him otherwise. At the sight of the church's secret technique for clearing the trials, everyone's breathing quickened, and they revealed looks of pleasant surprise. When you use this secret technique to clear the heavenly barriers, you can choose to go to some worlds where the time flow is much faster. A few months might have passed there, but only a few days might have passed here. This will increase your success rate and also give you more time to cultivate. Therefore, everyone started to comprehend the profoundness of the snap of fingers, preparing to break through to the next level of the heavens. The first to clear the trial was Tyrant and Philip's group. Both of them had reached tier 3 of the divine level, and they could be said to be the 2 strongest out of the 6 in terms of their realms and abilities. Tyrant's lips curled into a cold smile, and the murderous aura around him grew thicker. Then I'll be going. Philip smiled faintly. Let's go. The 2 of them turned into 2 beams of light and soared into the sky, disappearing into the clouds in the blink of an eye. 6 hours later, the Tier 3 divine level blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor exchanged a glance and smiled. There seemed to be an invisible tacit understanding between them. The 2 of them had been in the Xingwu region for many years, respectively in charge of the Myriad Stars Palace and the Full Moon Temple. They could be said to have known each other for a very long time, and their comprehension of the twin moons projection during this period of time was very effective. Now that they looked at each other and smiled, they each took a step forward. Regardless of whether it was their disposition or their actions, they gave off a feeling as if they were one person. Even their martial wills seemed to have become one. Thank you, Imperial Preceptor, for giving us a new lease of life. We'll be going now. Fang Xinjiang nodded. At the next moment, the 2 of them also disappeared into the clouds with a flash. After another few hours, Lan Yu and the 4th prince finally finished their preparations. The 2 of them were experts who had already stepped into the 2nd tier of the divine level and possessed the 3 secret arts: Mystical Prince, Twin Moons Projection, and Instant Flicking. They also had legacies from the Mystic Abyss Heavenly Emperor and the Full Moon Temple respectively, and were striving for Tier 3 of the divine level. Their success rate could be said to be the highest. The 4th prince nodded toward Fang Xinjiang. I'll be troubling Imperial Preceptor from now on. It's fine. Fang Xinjiang waved his hand. At the next moment, the 4th prince turned into a sword shadow, piercing through the sky and dashing out toward the 9 heavens. Lan Yu took a long look at Fang Xinjiang. To begin with, she had some admiration for Fang Xinjiang. Right now, when Fang Xinjiang's heart sword was revealed, it was like the world's most attractive poison. Lan Yu's gaze could not help but reveal a strange expression. At the next moment, Lan Yu broke into a brilliant smile and soared up into the sky, following closely behind the 4th prince. Wait for my return. Looking at the empty hall before him, Fang Xinjiang closed his eyes and started cultivating. For the next 7 days, he would wait here for the 6 of them to successfully advance and return. Of course, he had also given orders for the 7 seals to be dealt with by the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, female saint, Prince Swetian, Ferdinand Charlot, and the others. About 6 days later, 2 streams of extremely majestic auras that were like brilliant suns descended from the sky. All the experts in the imperial capital were astonished. Sensing that the 2 gushes of auras had disappeared from the palace, all of them were surprised and bewildered. Fang Xinjian opened his eyes and looked at Tyrant and Prince Philip. Right now, their dispositions were completely different from when they had left. Even their clothes had been changed into metal armor, and there were hints of killing auras on their faces. They had clearly experienced a series of great battles. Fang Xinjian smiled. It seems that the 2 of you have successfully stepped into Tier 4 of the divine level. Tyrant let out an emotional exhale. We stayed in that world for close to 5 months. That land had been divided up by the Mage Association and the Holy Sea of Truth. The 2 influences kept each other in check, and there were also monsters from other universes invading. Thankfully, the 2 of us joined forces and killed all those monsters, restoring history to its rightful place. But we also put in a lot of effort. A hint of lingering fear flashed in Philip's eyes. We don't know where those monsters came from. They're very difficult to deal with. It's good that you're back. Fang Xinjian's martial will swept across the sky. The astral ancestor and the blue sacred moonlight should be back soon. It was a pity that 1 day later, on the day of the appointment with the immortal child, the astral ancestor, the blue sacred moonlight, the 4th prince, and Lan Yu were all unable to rush back in time. However, Fang Xinjian no longer had the time to wait. He handed the matter over to Tyrant and Prince Philip and flew up into the sky alone. There, his clone from Demonic City's sun had already arrived. The 2 bodies merged into one, and Fang Xinjian immediately sensed an explosive power seething in his body. This time around, I can take this opportunity to strive for Tier 6 of the divine level and train myself properly through the lengthening of the time. The instant sword, heart sword path, and divine country all require a long period of hard work to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at Wolfhowl. The immortal child was already waiting there. The 2 of them exchanged a glance and smiled. Let's go. Please. A short moment later, the 2 figures disappeared from this world. There were still countless universes, and the countless timelines flashed before Fang Xinjian's eyes. When he finally arrived at his destination and stopped moving, Fang Xinjian opened his eyes and felt a little strange. My body? Am I that strong? Terrifying powers seethed in his body, giving him the feeling that he was too strong right now. Simultaneously, a stream of silver light cut across the sky and appeared before him. It wrapped itself around Fang Xinjian's finger at a speed that surpassed Fang Xinjian's reaction. Fang Xinjian from Earth. You possess the unparalleled determination to reach the ultimate level. Welcome to the White Army. Chapter 9-10. White Army. What's this? Fang Xinjian looked at his finger in astonishment. There was a pure white ring fixed firmly on his index finger, and intense power was passively transmitted out from it. Fang Xinjian could sense that there was an endless amount of power contained within it. Just as he was wondering what it was, a voice rang out in his mind. It was the immortal child's voice. I sense that this is very similar to the God of Universal Truth's power. God of Universal Truth? Wait a minute. You! Fang Xinjian's eyes shot out streams of sword light. He finally realized the reason why his body was so powerful to the point where it was abnormal. The immortal child let out a bitter laugh. It might be some sort of mutation caused by the double moon's projection. We've merged together. Fang Xinjian's martial will scanned his body crazily. He sensed that about 2/5 of the seething powers in his body did not belong to him, and they did not even listen to his control. That was the immortal child's power. After coming to this world, they had merged into one due to the double moon's projection. Just as Fang Xinjian was feeling troubled by the current situation, another two streams of light flashed in the sky, and seething powers were emitted. Again, Fang Xinjian's brows twitched, and he darted into the spatial gaps with a single step. However, a stream of purple light seemed to ignore space and followed him in. With a flash, it arrived on Fang Xinjian's other hand. Fang Xinjian, from Earth, you have the ability to transmit love to others. You belong to the Purple Army. With a cold snort, Fang Xinjian's right hand, which had the ring on it, was disintegrated. Then with a flash, he broke through the atmospheric layer and arrived in outer space. However, after his disintegrated right hand recovered, the purple ring was still on his hand, unscathed. The other silver ring in the stream of light followed him, penetrating through space, disappearing and then appearing on his left hand. In that instant, silver energy burst out, scattering across the entire sky like a sun. Immortal child from Miracle World, you have the ability to carry out justice. Welcome to the Silver Army. In the blink of an eye, two more rings appeared on Fang Xinjian's body. A total of 3 rings, white, purple, and silver in color. Every single one of them seemed to contain a boundless amount of power, seemingly inexhaustible. This is the power of the demon gods. The immortal child sighed. What is going on with this world? Demon god. Fang Xinjian suddenly came to a realization. No, the twin moon's projection allows one to enter another world. However, the immortal child and I, one of us is from Earth, while the other is from Miracle World. Logically speaking, I should have gone to Earth's parallel world while the immortal child should have gone to Miracle World's parallel world. We come from 2 different worlds. Is this the reason why the double moon's projection changed? Just as Fang Xinjian was thinking about these, the immortal child said, "Someone is coming. No matter what, let's hide first and understand the situation in this world." Fang Xinjian nodded slightly. At the next moment, with a flash, he disappeared into the vast starry sky. He did not even return to the planet under his feet. Instead, he turned into a stream of invisible waves and flew toward another planet nearby at light speed. Not long after he disappeared, 3 beams of light, white, silver, and purple, descended from the sky. It was as if 3 invisible powers had collided fiercely. Countless wills were transmitted to and fro. What happened? How long has it been since something like this happened? Search at full power and find the mastermind. There are 3 rings. There are at least 3 people who have obtained extraordinary powers illegally. Find them and kill them all. Let them learn reverence. The orange-red surface of the planet was filled with deserts. What could be seen with the naked eye were sand dunes and gravel. There was no liquid water at all. Sand and dust floated in the atmosphere, and from time to time, sandstorms would occur. Raising his head and looking over, as the atmosphere was too thin and there were many and large dust particles, a portion of the red light that came from the sun was scattered, causing the entire setting sun to appear blue. This was Mars, one of the 8 planets in the solar system. Stepping on the gravel on the surface of Mars, Fang Xinjian raised his head and looked at the starry sky, determining the universe he had arrived in. Is this still Earth's parallel universe? It's also because of this that I'm the master. After the fusion, I'm still the one who controls most of the conjured physiques and powers? The immortal child had clearly thought of the same question and said, "It seems that we came from different worlds and arrived in different parallel worlds. The double moon's projection technique has also undergone a mutation because of this." Fang Xinjian nodded. After understanding the problem with the fusion, he and the immortal child discussed if they could separate. However, the moment they controlled their powers and separated to the sides, they felt that there was a drag between the powers, and they were unable to differentiate them clearly. They were like 2 bottles of ink mixed together, and it was hard to tell who was who. This won't do. After trying again and realizing that they were still unable to separate, the immortal child decided to give up for now. There's no way to separate them for now. We can only make do with this. Fang Xinjian started to observe his lifespan. The reason why he had used the instant snap to come here was so that he could gain more time. However, if his lifespan did not allow it, then it would be meaningless. However, the situation was the same as what he had encountered in the Mystic Abyss Vault. After a total of 40 seconds, his lifespan was only reduced by 1 second. This meant that there was a time difference between this world and Miracle World by 40 times, yet his lifespan was not affected at all. Excellent. After determining the basic problems, Fang Xinjian looked at his palm again. He saw that there were a total of 3 rings on his left index finger, ring finger, and right index finger. They respectively emitted a purple, silver, and white glow. What on earth are these? Fang Xinjian sensed that they contained astonishing powers. With a slight thought, his body burst out with endless white light. Within this light, it seemed as if he could materialize anything as long as he wanted to. Therefore, as his thoughts changed once again, the surrounding white light quickly took shape, turning into all sorts of aircrafts, cannons, flying swords, armor, and even many white birds flying in the Martian atmosphere. The immortal child sighed and said, "What astonishing powers! There's no need to understand the principles or cause and effect at all to be able to create whatever you want to create." Fang Xinjian looked at the various materials that the white light had created, and his interest was piqued. With another change in his thoughts, a white city appeared on the surface of Mars. Everything appeared from nothing. Buildings made from reinforced concrete, streets filled with heavy traffic, and all sorts of trucks, vans, sports cars, and sedans moved to and fro on the road. Several million people walked on the streets. Some were eating, some were working, and some were shopping. They were even conversing, watching television programs, or using their cell phones. Every part of the city was so detailed that it was like the real world. Moreover, this was something that Fang Xinjian had created with a single thought. Chapter 9:11. This is really unbelievable. At the sight of this scene, even Fang Xinjian was astonished. He did not think about the specific principles at all. He merely thought of these things, and the white glow automatically limited the several 100 million items and several million humans before him. At the thought of this, a hint of curiosity flashed in his eyes. He started to wonder what the limits of this ring were. Therefore, the white city suddenly disappeared, and nuclear missiles appeared in the sky one after another. Hundreds and thousands of nuclear missiles lined up at once, amounting to several tens of millions of nuclear missiles. Each of them contained a soul-stirring power. Then, Fang Xinjian's thoughts changed once again. A spaceship that blotted out the sky and sun appeared in the sky above Mars. The sudden appearance of the spaceship, which was over 30 kilometers long, caused a storm that swept out for several thousand kilometers. On the long white battleship, several 100,000 cannons opened up in unison, and white energy surged in each of the cannons. Such power! A gleam shone in Fang Xinjian's eyes. This is too amazing. This time around, the white battleship disappeared once again, and a pure white flame appeared in the sky. It then instantly swelled up into a huge fireball. This was a sun. A pure white sun was instantly born in the sky and rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it was about to reach a size of several 100 kilometers. The entire Martian land trembled violently, and the geomagnetic field was greatly disturbed. The temperature of the atmosphere rose rapidly. Just as the entire Martian land was about to be ignited, Fang Xinjian's will changed slightly, and he retracted the white sun. The corners of Fang Xinjian's lips curled up into a hint of a smile. After the sun disappeared, a black hole suddenly appeared in the air. It was a black hole. The sudden appearance of the black hole immediately sucked in a large amount of matter. However, It had just expanded to a size of several thousand meters and absorbed 10 million tons of matter when the entire black hole evaporated completely. Fang Xinjian could sense that the energy in the ring was still surging like the mountains and seas. However, he could no longer borrow any of it. Is there a limit to the amount of energy that can be used? Fang Xinjian then looked at the purple ring. With a single thought, purple light burst out, turning into many sharp swords that appeared in the sky. All of them were the various swords that Fang Xinjian had used along the way. There were even Thunder Calamity, Abyss, and Panway among them. Every single one of them had the exact same powers as before. It's also a materialization ability. Fang Xinjian was experimenting with the power of the purple ring. Suddenly, with a thought, the purple light formed a human figure. It was his appearance. However, no matter how hard he tried, the human form was still a human form. He could walk, run, jump, and even talk like those animals before. But at the end of the day, it was just a form. It didn't have true life and will. Only by materializing matter will it work. Life cannot truly materialize. Following that, Fang Xinjian spent a few days experimenting with all the abilities of the ring. Almost all the substances that he could think of could be materialized by the ring's energy. However, there was a daily limit to the amount of energy that he could borrow. Therefore, he could create a miniature sun, but he couldn't create a real star. He could create the Panway sword, but he couldn't create the legendary White Emperor Zenith sword. There were also things that existed in his imagination, such as many of the myths and legends in Demonic City. He could only create an illusion, stacking them up based on his imagination. He couldn't really materialize them. After experimenting with the ring's abilities, Fang Xinjian looked toward the distant Xian Kong and suddenly asked, "Immortal child, what do you plan on doing next? Since we can't separate, I'll just cultivate in your body. This world is sufficient for us to cultivate for 1 to 2 years. Since it's because of this world, we should be able to recover after we return to the land," the immortal child said calmly. The immortality saint said calmly, "Moreover, these 1 to 2 years are sufficient for me to improve rapidly and temper the things that I haven't been able to properly digest." Fang Xinjian moved slightly and broke through the atmosphere, leaving the Martian environment. He looked toward Earth. "However, we can't just go into seclusion like this," Fang Xinjian said. "We must constantly pay attention to the situation on Earth and guide it slightly, letting the situation operate according to our will. When the need arises, we'll be able to complete the mission immediately and clear this stage." The immortal child nodded in agreement. This was indeed the case. If they were to clear the stage, it would be too troublesome if they had to spend a tremendous amount of time to lay out their plans and battle. After all, they could not leave Miracle World for too long. Therefore, they must have complete control over the situation. When the need arose, they would be able to turn the tables and clear the stage. Only then would he be able to cultivate with peace of mind and clear the stage at any time when the need arose. Fang Xinjian sensed the feeling brought about by the sudden inspiration. With a thought, he turned into an invisible electromagnetic wave and flew out toward Earth. On Earth, in the depths of the Kunlun Mountains, a group of over 10 men and women were carrying backpacks and wearing stormtroopers as they crawled on a stretch of snow plains. A golden-haired lady, who was in the lead, shouted, "Li Hui, how long more before we can arrive?" A man with a full beard at the back of the group said, "We'll be able to pass through the snow plains in about 10 kilometers. When we get there, we'll rest for the night. After crossing 2 mountains and a valley, we'll be able to reach the White Army's base." The golden-haired lady cursed and continued to walk on the snow plains with great difficulty. However, the determination in her eyes grew increasingly intense. "I must join the White Army. I've already tried the other 12 armies. This is my only hope." However, just then, a whistling sound rang out in the sky. 2 streams of golden light traversed across the sky and flew toward them. The man by the name of Li Hui looked at the two streams of golden light and said nervously, "They're from the Gold Army. They must be from the Beira clan." The golden-haired lady said furiously, "To be able to fly with the ring's energy, they must be at the colonel level of the Gold Army. Do they still have any shame?" Just as everyone was speaking, two streams of golden light descended from the sky and stood before the golden-haired lady. They were two Caucasian warriors who were encompassed in golden light. The golden light turned into armor that encompassed their bodies, allowing them to float above the ground. They looked down at the couple before them. The gold warrior in the lead looked at the golden-haired lady with a greedy expression and said, "Jessica, you should know what we're here for. State your price. If we're satisfied, we might be able to let you off." Chapter 9:12. Looking at the greedy gazes of the two gold warriors, Jessica's heart sank. She understood what this represented too well. The 13 armies on Earth represented 13 types of powers. As long as one wore the ring, they would be able to activate the powers in the ring and display all sorts of unbelievable abilities. The most common ability was the ability to materialize. In order to wear the ring, one would need to be qualified, and the qualification would depend on one's personality. One would only be able to wear the ring and activate the powers in it if one matched the personality of the ring. As for how much power one could activate, it would depend on one's will. The people who could activate the strongest powers were the commanders of the various armies. Jessica looked at the gold army before her. The gold ring represented their personality and their thirst for knowledge. They wanted to know everything, understand everything, and pursue the truth of the universe. However, Jessica just so happened to have something on her that was extremely attractive to them. In order to satisfy the two gold warriors, Jessica knew that she would probably have to bring out that thing. However, she still held onto the slight hope that the other party did not know of the existence of this thing. Therefore, she gritted her teeth and said, "I don't have anything anymore. My clan has frozen all of my assets, but I can first put them on credit. As long as I pass the White Army's test and become a white warrior, I'll be able to get back everything that I've lost. When the time comes, I'll give you guys a satisfactory reward." "Assets?" The gold warrior licked his lips, and the greed in his eyes grew increasingly intense. "What we want isn't just this. What we want is knowledge, the knowledge that's hidden on you. Hand over that page of the Book of Wisdom that you've obtained." The other gold warrior smiled evilly. "We can let you off." Jessica's countenance sank. She knew that the thing she was most worried about had happened. The thirst for knowledge that the color gold represented made the gold warriors want to possess all kinds of knowledge. With the commander in the lead, everyone in the gold army had a great thirst for knowledge. Compared to fighting for fame and wealth, they spent more time in the laboratory, ceaselessly exploring the profoundness of the universe. Jessica should have known long ago that the only thing that could attract these nerds out of the laboratory was the page of the Book of Wisdom that she had. The Book of Wisdom had been discovered in a cave on the back of the moon in 2008. There was a total of 2,333 pages, and it recorded countless amounts of knowledge that far surpassed this era. It was a pity that in order to get their hands on the Book of Wisdom, the 13 armies had engaged in a great battle, and the 2,333 pages of the Book of Wisdom had been scattered across the world. Each lucky person who managed to get a part of it had either been beaten to death or had become an expert who could dominate the world. Jessica had unintentionally obtained a page and thought that she was destined to receive it. However, she had not expected that she would fail all 12 armies' tests consecutively. She did not even have the right to put on the ring. Jessica asked, "What Book of Wisdom? I don't have that kind of thing." Before she could finish her sentence, she saw a golden warrior wave his palm, and a golden blade of light slashed out from the side of his palm. It swept out like a golden laser beam, instantly slashing the 5 men and women beside Jessica into 2 at the waist. Bright red blood sprayed out and landed on the white snow, even emitting hot steam. At the sight of this, the remaining 10 men and women bellowed furiously. They drew their automatic rifles and were about to shoot at the 2 golden warriors. Unfortunately, metal sparks lit up on their bodies, but the bullets could not penetrate the faint golden light on their bodies. They could not even make them take a step back. Ignorant. One of the golden warriors let out a cold laugh, raised his blade, and slashed down. Another 5 men and women were slashed at the waist. They cried out agonizingly as they fell to the ground, their intestines and internal organs splattering all over the ground. "Stop!" Jessica said furiously. "All of you, stop! Stop fighting!" The men and women who had been shooting also stopped in fear. They looked at the 2 golden warriors with pale countenances, as if they had only just recalled how terrifying these monsters were. The golden warrior in the lead flicked his finger and said, "Have you had enough? Hand over the Book of Wisdom. My patience is limited." Jessica said with a gloomy countenance, "At least tell me who you are? Haha, are you looking for revenge? You're welcome to do so anytime," the Caucasian man in the lead said. "I'm Claude from the Beira clan, the Gold Army's colonel. You better think this through before you seek revenge. This time around, I snatched something from you and bullied you. Therefore, I'll spare your life. However, if you want to take revenge on me next time, I won't hold back." Jessica smiled mockingly, as if mocking the other party's hypocrisy. However, she sighed inwardly. That Claude from the Beira clan who has recently risen in fame? As expected, their clan has set their sights on me. Just then, a cold voice rang out, long-winded. Before anyone could react, a figure descended from the sky and stepped on Claude's head. Under the pressure of the violent force, Claude's head exploded like a tomato. However, the violent power did not stop there. It continued to spread down through Claude's spine, chest, and internal organs. Wherever it passed by, his body would turn into meat paste. In the end, only a pool of blood and flesh could be seen splattering on the ground. There was no longer any sign of Claude. Everyone looked at this scene in astonishment. To think that Claude, who was at the level of colonel, had been stomped into meat paste by an unfamiliar man. Claude was in existence who could single-handedly deal with a modern special forces unit, countless firearms, and could fly at supersonic speed. To think that he had been stomped to death. At the next moment, everyone looked at the black-robed man who had suddenly appeared, and their eyes were in a daze. The other party's eyes were like a pair of bottomless black holes, wanting to suck everyone's souls into them. Only the other Gold Army's warrior retreated over 100 meters away with a swoosh. He said furiously, "Who are you? Do you know who the person you've killed is? Today, everyone here will be buried with you. They'll all die because of you." Everyone, who had been in a daze earlier, also reacted at this moment. Jessica's countenance turned grim. If it was said that she had lost a page of the Book of Wisdom, then not only would she lose this page of the Book of Wisdom, but she would also have to face the Beira clan's crazy vengeance. It was a great clan that had a legacy of 5 generations in the Gold Army and had general-level existences. Their powers had far surpassed Jessica's imagination, and she could not even muster up any will to resist. Faced with the threat from the remaining Gold Warrior, Fang Xinjian could not be bothered to reply. He merely clenched his fist across space, crushing the remaining warrior into a lump of flesh and blood that scattered into the air. At the sight of this scene, Jessica's countenance twitched once again. She smiled bitterly and looked at Fang Xinjian. "Why were you so rash? Do you know that you've gotten yourself into big trouble?" Chapter 9:13. Fang Xinjian did not reply to Jessica's question. Instead, when his gaze swept past her body, a hint of surprise flashed in the depths of his eyes. It was because the Jessica before him looked almost identical to his good friend Jessica back in Demonic City. It was just that Jessica had betrayed him after he left home and was eaten up by Tyrant in the end. The Jessica in front of him should be the Jessica in a parallel world. However, none of this mattered. The reason why Fang Xinjian had come to the Kunlun Mountains was because he had been following his sudden inspiration senses. He knew that this was the crux for him to clear the trial and that he needed help with something. However, after arriving at the Kunlun Mountains, he realized that this feeling had spread out within a range of several hundred leagues. However, no matter how he searched, he could not find the true source. Instead, he discovered the existence of Jessica's group. From their conversation, he understood whose influence the Kunlun Mountains belonged to. The White Army? Based on what they said, there are 13 armies on this earth. They should be the 13 demonic gods' influences, and not like how it was in Miracle World where the Holy Sea of Truth is up against the remaining 12 mages. Fang Xinjian thought, based on the way things have been done in the past, they want to guide the parallel world's history toward Miracle World. In that case, do they want me to help the White Army fight against the other 12 factions? And there's also this ring. It's probably best to let the night cultivation technique replace the powers of this ring. At the thought of this, Fang Xinjian already had a plan in mind. However, Jessica felt increasingly infuriated by how Fang Xinjian was ignoring her. She could not help but ask, "Which faction are you from? Why did you kill Claude?" Fang Xinjian did not reply. Or perhaps he could not be bothered to answer her question. He grabbed Jessica with one hand and flew up into the sky. "Bring me to the White Army's base." "Let go of me," Jessica said furiously. "You've already offended the Gold Army. Are you still thinking of offending the White Army? Even if you don't wish to live, I still want to live. They won't be able to kill me," Fang Xinjian said coldly, "and as long as you're by my side, no one on this planet will be able to kill you." "Haha," Jessica laughed exaggeratedly. "Who do you think you are? The 13 heroes?" Fang Xinjian frowned and asked, "Who are the 13 heroes? Are they very powerful?" Jessica rolled her eyes, feeling speechless. The 13 heroes were the founders of the 13 armies and the first extraordinary humans in history to put on rings. They had saved all of humanity during the calamity and were the legendary heroes. The fact that the other party didn't even know about this made her speechless. "What exactly do you want? Bring me to the White Army." Fang Xinjian's gaze turned cold as he coldly stated, "Maybe I've been too polite and made you forget the fact that your life is now in my hands." A hint of anger flashed in Jessica's eyes. "All right, you want to die?" She pointed. "Go that way." Hence, Fang Xinjian flew and stopped under Jessica's guidance. After traveling for tens of kilometers, he arrived at the peak of a snowy mountain. There was an abandoned temple at the peak of the mountain. Fang Xinjian followed Jessica into the temple and frowned. He had searched this place previously but had not discovered anything special. Just as Fang Xinjian was thinking of this, Jessica took out a white ring and said, "Open the door." Looking at the white ring on Jessica's hand, Fang Xinjian scanned it with his martial will and discovered that this ring was no different from the one he had. It was just that the 3 rings on his hand had all been concealed by his illusory arts, and no one could see them. Just as Jessica took out the white ring, streams of white light were emitted from it. The white light formed a door, and when the door opened, it revealed a stretch of white valley. Spatial door. Fang Xinjian was slightly stunned. "The energy in the ring can form something like this? Why are you still in a daze? Are you scared?" Jessica turned and threw a glance at Fang Xinjian. Right now, she understood that since she was unable to stop this unfamiliar man, she might as well bring him to the White Army and let the people there deal with him. Fang Xinjian smiled, grabbed Jessica, and crossed the door, arriving in this stretch of white valley. The entire valley was milky white, and the sky was a faint bright white. The grass, trees, and sand beneath their feet were all pale white. The animals and birds in the valley also seemed to have been dyed in a layer of white paint. This was a pure white world. Fang Xinjian scanned this small world with his martial will and sighed, Amazing. To think that you can use the ring's powers to form a small world. It's no wonder that I couldn't find any traces of you even after searching the entire Kunlun Mountains. You're praising us too much. As they spoke, a young man dressed in a white Taoist robe with his hair casually draped over his shoulders appeared before the two of them. With a slight wave of his hand, he grabbed the white ring in Jessica's hand and gently put it on his finger. He smiled and looked at Jessica. Miss Jessica, congratulations. You've obtained the right to further your training. If you can put on the ring, then the White Army welcomes you. Priest Tai. Jessica ran behind the young priest at the speed of a 100-meter dash. She pointed at Fang Xinjian and said, I was forced to come here by him. He killed the Gold Army's Claude. Priest Tai frowned. He had sensed a familiar aura from the other party earlier and had a slightly favorable impression of the other party. However, when he heard that the other party had killed Claude, his hostility rose up. Who are you? Why are you making a move on the people from our 13 armies? There's no need for you to know who I am, Fang Xinjian said calmly. This is the White Army's headquarters, right? Get your leader to come out. I have something to say to him. Hearing Fang Xinjian's shameless words, Priest Tai's brows raised up high, and he became stern. What nonsense, a junior. The commander isn't someone you can meet just because you want to. Fang Xinjian said calmly, I have nothing to say to you. Just bring me to meet your commander. Young man, do you know what you're saying? Priest Tai asked with a frown. Jessica said, Priest Tai, be careful. He only used one foot to trample Claude to death. So he's an expert? Priest Tai assessed Fang Xinjian in detail. Which army are you from? Do you know that by killing Claude, you've brought great trouble to your elders? He's just an ant. Fang Xinjian waved his hand and said, I came here today to meet the White Army's leader and see if he's worthy of my support. Arrogant. Priest Tai had already treated Fang Xinjian as a junior who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Moreover, he felt that he had already exercised forbearance repeatedly, yet Fang Xinjian was still being so overbearing. Therefore, he wanted to teach Fang Xinjian a good lesson. As Priest Tai spoke, he slapped out with his palm, and white light rose up from his ring, turning into a huge palm the size of a field. It slapped out fiercely toward Fang Xinjian. The ferocious power was as if a palm had lashed out, causing the air to explode. Under the strong gales, all the plants in the entire valley trembled. The intense air currents blew into Jessica's eyes, making it almost impossible for her to open them. Faced with Priest Tai's palm, Fang Xinjian appeared calm. He even had the time to use his martial will to scan that white palm. He understood that this palm was not purely using brute force. Instead, it was using white energy to simulate the circulation of martial forces. This palm was equivalent to a palm strike that a Tier 1 divine-level expert had sent out across space with their martial will. Chapter 9:14. The huge white palm slapped down with the force of the sky collapsing. It could destroy a street and crush over 10,000 people into meat paste with a single attack. For this person to be able to kill Claude with a single attack, he's probably at the level of a major general or even a lieutenant general. However, I've long since reached the level of a general. Moreover, in the sacred white crevice, my powers have increased by at least 3 levels. With this palm, even if he doesn't die, he'll be seriously injured. Just as Priest Tai thought that his palm attack would be sufficient to subdue this unfamiliar man, Fang Xinjian raised his palm slightly. Ring? Come to think of it, I have one too. In that instant, piercing white light burst out from his hand. The white light intertwined and turned into a sword shadow that soared into the sky, piercing out toward the palm that Priest Tai had unleashed. As if he had been inspired by the other party, Fang Xinjian used the white energy as his martial will, turning it into the all-conquering sword intent and thrusting out. Under Priest Tai's astonished gaze, The huge palm that he had condensed was easily shattered like a piece of tofu. It was minced into a myriad of light spots by the white sword shadow. Swoosh! The sword shadow paused for a moment and then crossed the air, piercing out toward him. Priest Tai instantly felt waves of tremendous pressure gushing toward him. It was as if the entire world had disappeared, and only that white sword shadow filled up his entire field of vision. Boom! He slapped out with his palm once again, and white energy gushed out from void space like tidal waves, striking out incessantly toward the sword shadow. The white energy seemed to have come to life in his hand, turning into blades, spears, staffs, and various other martial techniques that struck out from all directions and angles. He was forced back more than 1,500 meters by the sword shadow, and only after retreating for another 1,500 meters did the power of the sword completely dissipate. Right now, Priest Tai's countenance was pale, and his eyes were filled with horror. Probably only their strongest expert, the commander of the army, would be able to do this. To think that the other party was also an expert at the level of a commander? Priest Tai stared at Fang Xinjian and said, "Who on earth are you? Why do you also have a white ring? I've never seen you before." Fang Xinjian said calmly, "Lead the way. I want to meet your commander." Man Tai looked deeply at Fang Xinjian and said, "Come with me." Since the other party already possessed the strength of a legion commander, he was naturally no longer someone he could stop. Jessica was dumbfounded as she watched Fang Xinjian leave with Tai Renren. How could she have imagined that Tai Renren, the strongest warrior she had ever met, would actually be defeated by a stranger? Just who was this person? Looking at the two leaving figures, Jessica gritted her teeth and followed after them. The sacred white crevice was a small world established using white energy. It was also the White Army's headquarters. Everything in this world seemed to be white. Whether it was the animals, the plants, the mountains, the rocks, or the sky, everything was white. In the depths of this world, on a plaza with a base of white jade, over 10 men and women were sitting cross-legged. Among them, there were Asians, Caucasians, and even black people. There were old people, middle-aged people, boys and girls. However, right now, all of them were wearing white Taoist robes and listening to the lecture solemnly. The person giving the lecture was an old man who was extremely thin and weak, and his long white beard reached the ground. The old man appeared drowsy, as if he would fall asleep at any moment. However, he kept speaking, explaining the usage of the white energy. The white ring requires a firm heart to pursue Tao. However, the path of pursuing Tao is like rowing a boat against the current. If you don't advance, you'll fall behind. What it needs is for you to focus on your cultivation at every moment, every minute, and every second. If you slack off in the slightest, not only will the ring's energy that you can activate decrease, but it might even regress and lose the right to possess the ring. The old man said calmly, "Therefore, our White Army has always been the one with the least number of people among the 13 armies. However, the upper limit that we can reach is also the highest. It's because the stronger one's heart to pursue Tao, the more resolute one's will be. The white energy complements one's temperament and will." Everyone listened to the old man's explanation seriously, even though what he said was a cliché. It was because he was the strongest expert in the White Army, the Commander Longmai, who had the most seniority and was also the oldest among the 13 armies. Just then, an explosion suddenly rang out in the distance. Then the earth trembled intensely, and a series of tremors shook the mountains. It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. Everyone who was still listening to the lecture immediately stood up, looking in the direction of the explosion in bewilderment. What's going on? Is it a battle between experts at the Major General or higher level? It's over. Just as everyone was feeling bewildered, Priest Longmai opened his sleepy eyes. A gleam flashed in his turbid eyes and he said calmly, "Don't make a fuss. Everyone, sit down and continue listening to the lecture." Everyone in the White Army still believed in the commander's authority. Hearing Priest Longmai's words, all of them sat back down and continued listening to the lecture and cultivating. A few minutes later, Priest Tai brought Fang Xinjian and Jessica to the training ground. The appearance of the two unfamiliar men and women immediately attracted everyone's attention. The reason why everyone's attention was attracted was because Fang Xinjian's heart sword had manifested, giving off an indescribable attraction. Everyone was unknowingly attracted to him, and they even developed a slight favorable impression of him. Priest Longmai lifted his head and focused his gaze on Fang Xinjian. He said, "Why have you come from afar? May I know why?" Fang Xinjian laughed and walked up. "From today onward, the White Army will be under my control." As Fang Xinjian said this, the slight favorable impression and attraction they had toward him instantly disappeared. They even turned into an even deeper sense of disgust. Unknowingly, everyone's emotions were being controlled by Fang Xinjian. What audacity! A black man jumped up and bellowed furiously, "This isn't a place for you to be impudent." With a rumble, it was as if another invisible hand had pressed down in the air. Before the black man who had jumped up could finish his words, he was sent flying out. His white robes were torn into shreds, and he fell to the ground, unconscious. "Does anyone else have any objections?" Fang Xinjian asked calmly. Seeing his actions, everyone from the White Army was enraged. Even Priest Tai, who had been pushed back by Fang Xinjian with a single move, was burning with fury. White energy soared into the sky from his body. They were from the White Army, one of the 13 armies. They were humans who had grasped extraordinary powers. When had they ever been bullied like this before? However, just as streams of white light soared into the sky, Priest Longmai stood up slowly and said, "Do you really wish to make an enemy out of our White Army?" Fang Xinjian said coldly, "I'm not here to make an enemy out of you. I'm just here to lead you guys." Chapter 9:15. In an instant, killing intent seethed in the eyes of everyone from the White Army. Priest Longmai's killing intent also soared. Fang Xinjian looked at Priest Longmai and said, "You're the White Army's commander, right?" Before his words ended, Fang Xinjian appeared before Priest Longmai with a slight flash. Fang Xinjian's movement at akin to light speed had completely surpassed everyone's imagination. His movement was comparable to light speed, and no one was able to react in time. Priest Longmai was the only one who slapped out a palm hurriedly. White light seeped out from every single pore in his body, and extremely pure white energy gushed into every single one of his cells. Under Fang Xinjian's martial arts scanning, Priest Longmai was constantly drawing out the white energy from the ring and circulating it in his physical body. It was as if he was constantly using the ring's energy to support and strengthen his physical body, turning his physical body into an existence that was close to a conjured physique. The strength of this White Army's commander was almost at Tier 2 of the divine level. Right now, the ring's energy throughout his body was seething, circulating and stacking up in a strange method. It gathered in his palm and turned into a white vortex. This sudden palm attack was already comparable to Priest Tai's full-powered attack. Faced with Priest Longmai's palm attack, Fang Xinjian did not dodge at all. He allowed Priest Longmai's palm to land on his chest. A loud rumble rang out, and streams of air currents spread out in all directions with Fang Xinjian's chest and Priest Longmai's palm at the center. The earth seethed and strong gales seethed. No one could withstand the sweeping air currents and retreated frantically in all directions. Priest Tai also grabbed Jessica and pulled her over, retreating a distance of over 1,000 meters. In the center of the battlefield, Fang Xinjian appeared before everyone unscathed. Fang Xinjian was already very powerful. Moreover, his body now contained the immortal child's powers. After the two of them merged, their battle prowess had increased by multiple folds. It could be said that even Fang Xinjian himself did not know what level he could reach if he were to go all out. Patting off the invisible dust on his shoulders, Fang Xinjian looked at Priest Longmai and said, Your technique is superb, but your strength is too weak. This is your full power? Priest Longmai's countenance was extremely grim, and white energy gushed out from his body once again, forming a huge white dragon around him. The giant dragon twisted its body, causing the air to tremble. Each and every one of its movements seemed to gently shake the entire small world. This was Priest Longmai's ultimate technique. He had used the ring's energy to condense a white dragon in his body for 100 years. Almost all of his strength, spirit, and will were gathered together. It was also the foundation of his Tao pursuit. In the future, he wanted to reincarnate into this white dragon after his death and step onto the true path of the great Tao. At the next moment, the huge white dragon let out a long roar toward the sky, and its entire body swelled up rapidly as if it had transformed. It was like a divine dragon from beyond the heavens, dashing out toward Fang Xinjian. The huge white dragon cut across the land and instantly engulfed Fang Xinjian's entire body. Then, without stopping, it continued to shoot out, traversing a distance of over 10 kilometers. Wherever it passed by, not a single blade of grass would grow, and all matter would be completely dissolved by the white energy, turning into a vacuum state. After performing this move, Priest Longmai seemed to have aged by 10 years in an instant. Even more wrinkles and age spots appeared on his face. A hint of pain flashed in his eyes. It's a pity, a pity. I've trained hard for 100 years, but all my efforts have gone to waste. As for Fang Xinjian, he did not think that Fang Xinjian would be able to survive that earlier attack. The high-density white energy could vaporize any matter, and no life would be able to survive that attack. This was his ultimate trump card. The white dragon, which had most of its powers depleted, would require at least over 10 years before it could be condensed again. This was why Priest Longmai felt so pained. If it was not because the battle prowess Fang Xinjian displayed was too astonishing, he would not have been so decisive in using this move. However, at the next moment, his pupils contracted abruptly, and his eyelids opened wide. He looked in disbelief at the spot where Fang Xinjian had been standing earlier. A human figure was floating in midair. It was because the few meters of ground under his feet had been vaporized by that earlier attack. The figure before him was none other than Fang Xinjian, who had remained unscathed from this attack. At the sight of this scene, Priest Longmai seemed to have aged once again. Even his full-powered attack was unable to do anything to Fang Xinjian. How powerful was Fang Xinjian? The people from the White Army all wore astonished expressions. Even Priest Longmai's full-powered attack was unable to do anything to Fang Xinjian. Even if all of them were to join forces, they would probably not be able to harm a single strand of Fang Xinjian's hair. Jessica was dumbfounded. She had thought that Fang Xinjian was courting death. However, by the looks of it, Fang Xinjian was like a ferocious dragon that had crossed a river, turning the entire White Army upside down. For a moment, the entire training ground fell silent. Everyone's gazes were focused on Fang Xinjian, as if waiting for his decision. From today onward, I'll be in charge of the White Army. As he spoke, he lifted his palm, and streams of white light were emitted from his ring. They formed a white robe and covered his body. Do you guys have any questions? Fang Xinjian's voice was like a thunderbolt that had descended from the heavens. It instantly spread throughout the entire small world, shaking up the world, and almost causing everyone's muscles and bones to turn numb. Those who were slightly weaker fell to the ground, unable to get up. It's a white ring. He's also a member of the White Army? Everyone was surprised. Priest Longmai's expression was one of shock and bewilderment. He thought, this is the ring that ran out to choose its owner some time ago? That means it has only been a few days since this person obtained extraordinary powers? How is that possible? Looking at the people before him, Fang Xinjian said calmly, next, gather the entire White Army and have all the warriors return here. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Everyone's emotions went from good to furious, to astonished, and then to puzzled. Their every action was under Fang Xinjian's control. At the next moment, a white light pillar gushed out from Fang Xinjian's body. Astonishing white energy seethed, gushing out in all directions like milky white shock waves. It was as if they wanted to fill up the entire small world completely. Everyone was encompassed by this unprecedented amount of white energy. Right now, the energy that Fang Xinjian displayed was more than what they had seen in their entire lives combined. At this moment, everyone suddenly had a feeling that for a person who could develop the White Ring to such an extent, if he did not become the White Army's commander, then who else could? At this moment, everyone's gazes were filled with respect when they looked at Fang Xinjian. Outside the small world, Fang Xinjian's palm opened up slowly, and the entire sacred white crevice appeared in his palm. Everyone's actions were reflected in his martial will. From the beginning to the end, everything that everyone had seen was just an illusory art that Fang Xinjian had created with a single thought. When he had found the White Army's base, the entire small world had already been in his hands. This casual illusory art was just to subdue this group of White Army's warriors. Therefore, over the next few days, the news of the White Army changing their commander and gathering all the white warriors swept through the entire world like a hurricane. The warriors from the other 12 armies learned of this. Chapter 9:16. In a huge space station in Earth's outer space, a man covered in golden light floated in the space station. The golden light turned into many threads and gushed out from his brain, connecting to the space station's computer. Sets of experimental data kept on flashing before his eyes. This man was the Gold Army's commander, as well as the head of the Beira clan, and the Gold Army's absolute leader, Edward. Just then, a projection appeared before him. It was a gold warrior who was half kneeling on the ground. He was one of the generals in the Gold Army, and his name was Barnett. However, even though he was only second to the Gold Army's commander, only a few other generals could compare to him, he was still half kneeling before Edward. At this moment, he was half kneeling in front of Edward, his face filled with deep reverence. "What happened?" General Barnett said. "Sir, Claude died on the Kunlun Mountains' snowy plains. The White Army's commander has changed to someone called Fang Xinjian. Based on the information we've received, Claude's death is related to this Fang Xinjian." Despite hearing that Claude had died, the White Army's leader changing seemed to be unable to stir up any ripples in Edward's heart. He said calmly, "That's all?" General Barnett was stunned for a moment before nodding. There seemed to be only countless experimental data jumping around in Edward's eyes. He said, "I got it." Barnett was stunned for a moment before asking, "Then, sir, do we need to take any action?" Edward said coldly, "We'll talk about it after I finish this set of experiments." "But the Book of Wisdom." "It's fine." In outer space, gravity and electromagnetic forces changed at the same time. Light rays started to distort, and hints of flickering glow appeared on Edward's body. "Other than me, who else on this planet has the right to hold the Book of Wisdom?" Edward said in a matter-of-fact tone, "Release the news of the Book of Wisdom and let them fight amongst themselves. I'll finish this set of experiments and then go clean up the mess." Looking at the changes in the space before him, the respect on Barnett's face grew even more intense. He sighed inwardly. As the collection progress of the Book of Wisdom continues to increase, the commander's growth in strength has become increasingly terrifying. The people from the other armies will never understand how much ahead Lord Edward is of them. This is an absolute difference brought about by knowledge and wisdom. In the small world of the sacred crevice, Fang Xinjian was reading a book with great interest. In front of him, the white bone sword danced in the air, flickering as if it was shuttling through the void. The immortal child's body slowly emerged from the sword. He nodded in satisfaction and said, "We've finally separated." During this period of time, the immortal child had been cultivating in seclusion in Fang Xinjian's body. However, he had unintentionally thought of a method that was not really a solution. It was to transfer his consciousness to a divine equipment, just like how divine-level experts would have their clones. Among the 4 divine swords, the white bone sword was the weakest in nature. Due to the fact that the instant sword was too profound and unfathomable, it was very difficult to improve its sword intent. As a result, it was currently the weakest. Therefore, it was taken over by the immortal child and temporarily separated from Fang Xinjian's body. Although the white bone sword was a little weaker, it was sufficient for the current immortal child. He turned to look at Fang Xinjian and asked, "Brother Fang, have you figured out anything?" Over the past few days, Fang Xinjian had read through the White Army's manuals. Due to the history of this planet, the 13 armies had appeared several hundred years ago. The ones who had the strongest desire to pursue the Tao were naturally the ascetic cultivators from the Buddhist sect, Taoist sect, and other religions. Therefore, from several hundred years ago, the White Army's main force had always been them. Their cultivation method was to circulate the ring's energy using the method they had cultivated arduously in the past. It was as if they were cultivating immortality through martial art. Right now, Fang Xinjian was reading through the secret manuals in the White Army's collection. Hearing the immortal child's question, Fang Xinjian said, "Although they went in the wrong direction from the start, they still managed to find a way out. After all, several hundred years of practice allowed them to unleash a portion of the ring's powers." That's right. How could there be no results after using the White Ring's energy to experiment with all sorts of martial techniques and moves for several hundred years? It was just that these results were still a far cry from Miracle World's martial art. After all, the history of extraordinary powers in this world was too short. The immortal child said, "The trial at Tier 6 of the divine level is definitely extremely dangerous. Since they want us to help the White Army dominate the world, then the White Army's strength is probably very different from the other 12 armies." Fang Xinjian added, "Or perhaps there are other powers that we don't know about hidden on this planet." The immortal child nodded in deep agreement. All of them understood the dangers of Tier 6 of the divine level, and that it was definitely not that simple. Simultaneously, Priest Longmai led over 10 other priests, who were also wearing Taoist robes, and walked through the sacred white crevice, slowly heading in Fang Xinjian's direction. These priests were the White Army's warriors who had rushed back from the outside world in response to Priest Longmai's call. Behind him was a middle-aged priestess. Her brows were raised high and her hair was white. Her eyes were filled with pernicious auras, and it was clear that she was a person who was not easy to talk to. It was one of the White Army's generals, Priestess Yen. Other than the commanders, the 13 armies were further divided into the ranks of general, colonel, lieutenant, and private. The generals were further divided into generals, lieutenant generals, and major generals. Priestess Yen, who was at the general level, was already a top-notch character in the White Army. Right now, she was following behind Priest Longmai with a displeased expression. "Martial uncle, why do we have to listen to that kid? No matter how amazing he is, we'll just fight it out with him. If we can't fight it out, we'll just die. Which member of the White Army would be afraid of death? Right now, we're surrendering in order to survive. What's the point of seeking the Tao and cultivating to become an immortal? I've been feeling so aggrieved over the past few days that I can't even meditate." Priest Longmai shook his head, and a strong sense of respect flashed in his eyes. Ever since Fang Xinjian displayed unfathomable abilities and unleashed an explosive burst of energy that could fill up the entire sacred white crevice, Priest Longmai's attitude toward Fang Xinjian had changed. His attitude toward Fang Xinjian had become extremely respectful. Hearing Priestess Yan's words, he shook his head and said, "You don't understand. This person's body contains the shadow of the great Tao. When I follow him, observe him, and get close to him, I can sense the aura of the great Tao. As long as I follow him, there'll be hope for me to seek the Tao. As the saying goes, if one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening without regrets, let alone some face. Chapter 9:17. Priestess Yen frowned, and the other general-level and colonel-level white warriors also exchanged glances. Aura of the great Tao? All of them felt that Priest Longmai's words were too profound. Priest Tai was the only one who revealed an expression of deep agreement. Priestess Yen, who had a fiery temper, was the first to be unable to hold it in and say, "Martial uncle, aren't you going overboard? No matter how amazing that Fang Xinjian is, he's still a human. It's just that he's ahead of us in terms of the usage of rings. To say that he has some aura of the great Tao is really..." At this point, Priestess Yen could not continue. If it was not Priest Longmai but someone else who spoke this way about Fang Xinjian, she would have given them a good scolding. When the others heard Priestess Yan's words, they nodded inwardly. This was also what they were thinking. Priest Longmai seemed to have seen through everyone's disbelief and sighed, saying, "You'll understand when you meet him." A short moment later, everyone arrived at the valley where Fang Xinjian was. The white bone sword had disappeared. The immortal child had just left on his own, and no one knew what he had gone to do. Fang Xinjian sat cross-legged, floating in midair. He emitted a cold and aloof aura, like a gem in the darkness. At the sight of Fang Xinjian, everyone was astonished by his appearance and disposition. It was as if they had never seen a human like him before. Even Priestess Yan's expression seemed to have lessened a little. Fang Xinjian lifted his head and threw a glance at the few people present. There were 2 generals, 3 lieutenant generals, 1 major general, and some other experts at the colonel and captain level. The White Army is now under my control. The reason I've summoned you guys here today is to tell you about the direction of the White Army's development. Wait a minute. Right now, Priestess Yen had already recovered from her astonishment at Fang Xinjian's appearance. She looked at Fang Xinjian and said, "Fang Xinjian, if you wish to subdue us, you can't expect us to submit to you with just a few words, right? If you want us to submit to you, show us what you've got." After saying that, she stared coldly at Fang Xinjian. Other than Priest Longmai and Priest Tai, the few warriors from the White Army behind her were also looking at Fang Xinjian coldly. It was as if they wanted to test Fang Xinjian's capabilities. Hearing Fang Xinjian's words, Fang Xinjian smiled. Almost everyone in the White Army had the courage to face death with equanimity. All of them had the courage to die for the sake of pursuing Tao. Fang Xinjian had long since understood that it would be difficult to subdue them with pure violence. Moreover, in order to clear this stage, it was impossible for him to kill too many of the White Army's warriors. Therefore, Fang Xinjian nodded and said, "You're right. If we can get you guys to submit just by talking, then you guys aren't fit to be members of the White Army. Then I'll show off my skills first." At the next moment, Fang Xinjian took a step forward and moved at akin to light speed, appearing before Priestess Yen with a flash. Before Priestess Yen could react, Fang Xinjian had already tapped a finger on her head. Priestess Yen was about to activate the powers in her body when she felt that her body had become lighter at the next moment. She felt as if her consciousness and soul had been struck out by Fang Xinjian's light finger. She could easily see her weak consciousness and her physical body falling backward slowly under Fang Xinjian's finger. "What have you done?" She wanted to shout out but realized that she was unable to make any sound at all. At the next moment, a wave of suction force came from behind her, and countless light shadows intersected before her. She realized that she had arrived in Earth's outer space. In her line of sight, the entire blue planet was shrinking rapidly. She was flying away from Earth at an unparalleled speed, and the starlight around her was dragged into a long line. Behind her, the huge fireball was getting bigger and bigger, and the scorching flames soon filled her entire field of vision. It's the sun. Seeing that she was dashing toward the sun at an unimaginable speed, even Priestess Yen, who was a top-notch expert in the White Army, could not help but reveal a terrified expression. The size of the sun, which surpassed Earth by 1.3 million times, and the fact that there was no end to it no matter how one looked at it, was enough to make any human who witnessed it feel inferior. Ah! It was as if a scream rang out from the depths of her soul. At the next moment, Priestess Yen discovered that she had bumped into the sun. There were endless flames, explosions, high temperatures, and high pressures. Other than flames, there were only flames. It was as if there was no end to them. This feeling was as if an ordinary human had fallen into the ocean and reached a depth of 10,000 meters. An endless sense of terror appeared in her heart. This was an instinctive fear that humans had toward natural powers. At the next moment, as she continued to go deeper into the sun, many miniature black holes appeared before her amidst astonishing explosions. With a dash, she darted into a black hole. In that instant, a series of light and shadows changed, and she appeared in a strange world. There were colorful lights everywhere, and many planets seemed to have been compressed into spots that were hard to see with the naked eye. The densely packed spots kept on flowing in space. As they flowed, the continents on the surface of the planets moved at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye, and the atmosphere seethed. Countless flowing spots gathered together, forming a river with no end in sight. One end of the river was the past, while the other end was the future. In every inch of space in the river, each light spot kept on splitting up, turning into countless light spots that scattered out. This caused the river to have endless tributaries. The endless tributaries seemed to want to fill up every inch of space, causing one to be unable to see the true appearance of the world. However, Priestess Yan's body continued to rise. As she rose, she could see more and more rivers and spots of light. The past and future of the entire universe seemed to be presented before her, bit by bit. Finally, when she reached the peak, she seemed to see the entire universe gathered together. At the next moment, as Priestess Yen continued to rise, this gathering also seemed to have turned into a light spot. It gathered together with the surrounding light spots, forming an extremely huge vortex. Countless unknown substances were gushing out from the center of the vortex. At that moment, big and small seemed to have lost all meaning, and time and space seemed to have been abandoned. Any observer would find it hard to describe how big the vortex before them was. The scene before them seemed to have turned into eternity. By the time Priestess Yen reacted, she had already knelt down on the ground, and tears were flowing down from the corners of her eyes. These were tears of being moved. They were the joy of being close to achieving her dreams. It was an indescribable feeling of great joy and joy. Is that all real? What do you think? It was an extremely realistic feeling, and there was no sense of falsehood. The scenes were even scenes that Fang Xinjian had seen when he was traversing worlds. They were the truths of the universe. How could Priestess Yen possibly think that they were fake? She looked at Fang Xinjian, prostrated herself on the ground, and her throat trembled slightly. Please teach me. The corners of Fang Xinjian's lips curled up into a hint of a smile. Behind Priestess Yen, the other warriors from the White Army who had been summoned back also prostrated themselves on the ground. Their gazes were filled with great respect. At that moment, Fang Xinjian knew that through illusory arts and the heart sword path he had created, he had gained complete control over the White Army. Chapter 9:18. 3 days later, in the central hall of the sacred White Crevice, a total of 39 warriors from the White Army were all present. Priest Longmai sat at the very front, and behind him were Priest Tai, Priestess Yen, and other general-level warriors. Behind them were the other warriors of various levels, including Colonel, Lieutenant, and Private. Jessica, who had just arrived, was also seated in the last row. She wore an astonished expression as she looked at Fang Xinjian on the stage. She had never expected that a young man whom she had casually met back then would be able to subdue the entire White Army and become a top-notch character on Earth. Today was the day that Fang Xinjian would be giving a lecture. He understood that if he wanted to change the direction of history, he could not just rely on Fang Xinjian's violent attack. He would also have to reform the White Army's cultivation method, allowing them to become stronger themselves. Or rather, it would allow them to have a powerful future. Therefore, he spent a few days and created a set of sword technique that circulated through the ring's energy. With Fang Xinjian's current realm, it was a piece of cake for him to do such a thing. This set of sword technique used the Holy Sea of Truth's universal truth longsword as its foundation, combined with several tens of other sword techniques, and was even modified according to the ring's special energy. Regardless of whether it was in terms of prowess or potential, it far surpassed those techniques that the White Army had created themselves. Of course, he would not really be explaining each and every word. The efficiency would be too low. Fang Xinjian used information currents as a medium, channeling the sword technique directly into everyone's mind. Through everyone's 5 senses, they instantly sensed that something had appeared in their mind. Then their bodies seemed to move on their own, starting to use the ring's energy to condense light swords and perform a set of sword technique. They had been circulating this universal truth longsword repeatedly in their minds, and all the members of the White Army wore intoxicated expressions. They had never expected that there would be a sword technique like the universal truth longsword in this world, that the ring's energy could be used in such a manner, or that the microscopic world would have such profoundness. At this moment, everyone was even more convinced of Fang Xinjian. This was especially so for Priest Longmai, Priestess Yen, and the others. Fang Xinjian was their greatest hope in pursuing Tao. Right now, if anyone went against Fang Xinjian, they would probably fight it out with them. Therefore, over the next few days, Fang Xinjian guided everyone in their sword techniques while diverting 99% of his powers to roam the universe, strolling around the sun, and continuously using the thunder-inducing technique to temper his martial will. Of course, this was only the cultivation of his basic abilities. Fang Xinjian's cultivation plan for coming to this world had been set a long time ago. The first was to perfect the instant sword, allowing all of his celestial eradication swords' sword intents to reach the pinnacle of the microscopic realm and maintain a balance. The prowess of the celestial eradication sword formation would also be perfected. Then, his cultivation of his of sword. Of the heart of the cultivation of the sword. The third was to integrate all the results of the above into his divine country. With the space as the base, the celestial eradication sword formation as the backbone, and the heart of the sword as the soul, he would integrate all the sword arts he had learned into it. Therefore, 99% of his powers continued to go to the sun to strengthen himself, while the remaining remained on earth. While teaching the White Army sword arts, he continued to absorb and ponder over the knowledge he had obtained from the Divine Emperor in the previous world, as well as the knowledge he had obtained from the wordless monument on earth. He used them to perfect the instant sword. In the hall, streams of pitch-black sword marks suddenly tore through the atmosphere, appearing in Fang Xinjian's surroundings. These sword marks slashed out by the instant sword seemed to have no beginning or end. They came and went without a trace, appearing abruptly. There were no signs that they had been attacked. This was the instant sword, a sword attack that should not have existed at a time that did not exist. This had been very powerful in battles in the past. However, in a battlefield where Fang Xinjian could move at light speed, distort space, and control his powers to the microscopic level, the prowess of the instant sword was too weak even though he was still unable to fend it off. However, as the nature of the instant sword was too profound, Fang Xinjian was still unable to perfect the sword intent of the instant sword even though he had continuously increased the prowess of the all-conquering, infiltrating void and light pursuit. The instant sword doesn't just involve the 4 basic forces: heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces, the Earth's astral forces, nuclear forces, and the forces that cause all living things to decay. It also involves the end of the four great forces, the changes to spacetime. Fang Xinjian was immersed in his thoughts regarding the instant sword. Just then, Priest Longmai walked over hurriedly. "Sir, there are rumors going around in the 12 armies that Jessica has obtained a page from the Book of Wisdom." Fang Xinjian's gaze flickered, and most of his attention continued to ponder over his sword arts. Simultaneously, he split out some of his will and asked, "What is the Book of Wisdom?" Therefore, Priest Longmai explained the matter regarding the Book of Wisdom. Upon hearing that the Book of Wisdom had come from the moon, Fang Xinjian's gaze lit up slightly. Previously, he had searched the moon and thought that there were no moon relics in this world. He had not expected that the moon relics in this world were actually a book. Priest Longmai continued, "Sir, the Black Army's grade has sent a message to invite us out to discuss the ownership of this page of the Book of Wisdom. How should we deal with this?" During this period of time, Fang Xinjian also understood that the White Army's situation was the same as what he had speculated previously. It was indeed one of the lower ranks amongst the 13 armies. After all, compared to the White Ring, which required one to have the heart to seek Tao, the other personalities, such as the greed represented by the Black Ring, the thirst for knowledge represented by the Gold Ring, the terror represented by the Yellow Ring, the desire to control represented by the Gray Ring, and so on, were easier to realize and persevere with. The Black Army was even more unique. There should only be one person in the entire army. Due to the nature of greed, the person who obtained the Black Ring would not be willing to share the power that represented greed. Therefore, they would engulf each other, leaving only one person behind. That person's body contained the wills of everyone in the Black Army, and only the person with the strongest will would be able to control the last person's body. Everything will continue as usual. There's no need to care about the people outside. Fang Xinjian said calmly, "Tell me more about the Book of Wisdom in detail." "Oh right. Did the White Army manage to get 1 or 2 pages of the 2,333 pages of the Book of Wisdom?" However, Fang Xinjian had not thought of touching the people from the other 12 armies. However, he was unable to stop the people from the other armies from wanting to test the capabilities of the White Army's new leader. After another 3 days, a man wearing a gray suit walked into the sacred white crevice under Priest Tai's lead. As the Gray Army's representative and a general-level character, his eyes revealed a hint of uncontrollable arrogance when he looked at each and every one of the White Army's warriors. "Brother Tai, I didn't expect that the White Army would submit to a single person within a short few days. This is really surprising." Chapter 9:19. Priest Tai lowered his head, as if he did not hear the sarcasm in the other party's words. Lord Fang Xinjian's cultivation is world-shaking, and he sees through the profoundness of the world. It's my honor to be able to serve under someone like him. Haha, the Gray Army's representative chuckled, feeling increasingly disdainful toward the White Army. He lifted his head and looked at the land in the sacred white crevice, and an irrepressible desire to possess it rose in his heart. This land should also be under the control of the army. The Gray Army had a strong desire to control. The group they formed could be the one with the best discipline amongst the 13 armies. Almost everyone from the top to the bottom had strict rules, and everything was under the control of the commander. The Gray Army's envoy followed Priest Tai to a side hall and saw that Priest Longmai was already waiting there to receive him. Priest Longmai cupped his hands and said, "Long time no see, Mr. Grimm. I wonder why you've come this time around?" Grimm nodded as well. Although Priest Longmai was not at the top amongst the commanders, in terms of experience and age, Priest Longmai was undoubtedly the best. Grimm had to maintain his respect. Priest Longmai, the Gray Army, Black Army, and Yellow Army have decided to hold a meeting to decide on the ownership of this newly discovered page of the Book of Wisdom. When the time comes, the representatives from the other armies will come as well. Hearing Grimm's words, Priest Longmai frowned. He knew that what was to come had come. This was different from how the 13 armies had been fighting over the Book of Wisdom back then. After so many years, the 13 armies had set a rule. After discovering the Book of Wisdom, each army would send a representative to decide on the ownership of this page of the Book of Wisdom. The army that obtained the Book of Wisdom would also have to compensate the remaining 12 armies accordingly. In the past, Priest Longmai knew that his faction's influence were too weak. Moreover, he was focused on pursuing Dao and could not be bothered to participate in the meeting. He would usually just give up. However, now that he had Fang Xijian as his backing, Priest Longmai became especially confident. He unknowingly straightened his back and said, "I understand. I'll inform the commander about this." Grimm frowned. The other party's confident look made him a little uncomfortable. He could not help but add another sentence, reminding them as if he was concerned, "This time around, Lord Grade is determined to get it. You guys better think about what kind of compensation you want." Priest Longmai smiled and said, "Haha, thank you for your concern. However, this time around, our White Army will probably want to fight for it as well." Green's eyes flashed as he probed, "Is it because of that Fang Xijian? Old friend Longmai, you have to think this through. Grade isn't someone who is easy to get along with. The Black Army has gathered everyone's wills into one, and he is currently at the critical juncture of clearing the wills. The Book of Wisdom is extremely important to him. Angering him won't end well for you. You don't have to worry about the specifics, Green." A hint of curiosity flashed in Grimm's eyes. He wanted to find out more about Fang Xijian's background. To think that he had given Priest Longmai so much confidence to go against Grade. However, Priest Longmai clearly did not plan on telling him. After discussing the time and venue for the meeting, he sent Fang Xijian off. After sending Grimm off, Priest Longmai walked excitedly toward the place where Fang Xijian was training in seclusion. He wore an excited expression like that of a child. The White Army had been silent for far too long. However, with Fang Xijian as their backing, it was finally time for them to hold their heads up high. Priest Longmai went up to Fang Xijian and reported, "Sir, it's really the Black Army's Grade. After not getting a reply from us after a long time, he called for a meeting to jointly decide on the ownership of the Book of Wisdom." Before Fang Xijian, Jessica sat there quietly, her expression filled with respect. Right now, Jessica was wearing a white ring on his finger. After being able to control the ring's energy, he felt even more how great Fang Xijian was. Standing before Fang Xijian, he felt that Fang Xijian was as vast and boundless as the sky. The power in Fang Xijian's body was so majestic that there was no end to it. Before Fang Xijian, there were a total of 12 pages that were neither gold nor silver. They were made from some unknown metal and were floating slowly. They were the pages of the Book of Wisdom. Other than one page which came from Jessica, the other 11 pages were from the White Army's collection. From this, it could be seen that the White Army did not have a high status amongst the 13 armies. It could be said that most of the discovered pages of wisdom were in the hands of the other armies. Fang Xijian looked at the Book of Wisdom before him, and a hint of contemplation flashed in his eyes. "Interesting. This Book of Wisdom is very helpful to me. Do you know where I can find more of it?" A few days later, in the city closest to the Kunlun Mountains snow plains, there were many people coming and going, appearing to be extremely lively. In the huge hall, there were staff members making arrangements everywhere. Many video cameras and cameras were set up there like long and short guns. Although they were all from Earth civilization, due to the existence of the 13 armies, the secular world in this world had gone through a great change. Although the governments of the various countries still existed, the supreme rulers had long since been changed to the various armies. Even ordinary people clearly understood the existence of extraordinary powers. This was especially so for the Black Army. The Grey Army's nature allowed them to control many countries. The meeting this time around was also a public event, and it immediately attracted the attention of countless news media. Hello everyone. This is the latest report brought to you by CATV. A new page of Wisdom Index has been discovered. The 13 armies will each send a representative to decide on the ownership of this page. This is already the 2032nd page of the Book of Wisdom that has been publicly discovered. It seems that it won't be long before all the pages of the Book of Wisdom are gathered. The White Army has changed its leader. Let's take a look at the information regarding the White Army's newest leader, Fang Xinjian. Just then, a series of astonished cries rang out from the crowd, and countless cameras were pointed toward the sky. As a stream of yellow light flashed by, a lady covered in yellow armor slowly descended. The yellow armor on the woman's body was exquisite. While it wrapped around the woman's figure, it also perfectly highlighted her curves. There was no trace of blood on her pale face. She landed on the ground expressionlessly and walked toward the center of the hall. Despite this, the moment she landed on the ground, she caused a great commotion. Expressions of terror appeared on the faces of countless people. Even most of the staff members were breaking out in cold sweat, not daring to look at that lady directly, let alone the surrounding crowd. It's the Witch of Trepidation. Is she the Yellow Army's representative this time around? SSSSS. This lady is very difficult to deal with. It seems that the Yellow Army doesn't wish to give up on this page of the Book of Wisdom either. Chapter 920. The Witch of Trepidation's appearance caused a huge commotion at the scene. Right now, the 13 armies ruled over the world, and the governments of all the countries were restricted by the commanders. These armies' warriors, who possessed extraordinary powers, were not restricted by any country's laws. It could be said that they would not be punished even if they were to casually kill ordinary people. Only when the army's warriors killed each other would they be punished. What the Yellow Army needed was fear. This fear did not come from themselves but from the fear others had toward them. This naturally required them to extract the emotions of fear from those ordinary people. With this, the Yellow Army had always been the influence that the commoners hated the most, feared the most, and feared the most amongst the 13 armies. The Yellow Army's warriors had always taken pleasure in torturing and killing the commoners and spreading fear. Among them, the general level and corps commanders were even more experienced in this. Take the Witch of Trepidation, for example. Although she appeared sexy, alluring, and extremely beautiful, no one had any feelings for her. It was because her hands were stained with the blood of her own kind. The Witch of Trepidation would torture and kill the ordinary people in her territory almost every day. Her favorite thing to do was to skin people and pull out their tendons. She was a character who could stop children from crying at night. No one dared to welcome her when she appeared. They could only watch as she walked into the hall and arrived at the conference room in China. Right now, the various television stations were broadcasting the entire process live in the conference room. There were over 100 government officials present, as well as over 20 people from the Grey Army and Yellow Army. Seeing the Witch of Trepidation's appearance, everyone present was slightly stunned. Those ordinary government officials broke out in cold sweat, and their legs and stomachs could not help but tremble. The Witch of Trepidation casually found a seat and sat down. A few members of the Yellow Army were already jogging over. The man in the lead smiled and said, "Madam, why have you come personally? The Book of Wisdom is of great importance. Can't I come?" The Witch of Trepidation threw a cold glance at him, and a yellow glow spread out slowly in the air, exuding a terrifying aura. It was the Yellow Army's ultimate technique, the spiritual light of trepidation. The few members of the Yellow Army were sweating profusely. Not only could the Yellow Army's warriors spread out the spiritual light of trepidation with their ring's energy, but those who were in a higher position would also naturally have a terrifying pressure toward those who were in a lower position. As for the other ordinary officials, they were in an even worse state. A few of the weaker ones even rolled their eyes and fainted from fright. A few representatives from the Grey Army also wore grim countenances, and cold sweat broke out uncontrollably on their backs. The Grey Army's Major General, McGraw, frowned and sighed. It seems that the Yellow Army hasn't completely given up on this page of the Book of Wisdom. Grade will probably have to pay a huge price. Another Major General, Odom, said, other than our Grey Army, the people from the other armies really don't have any discipline and act recklessly. If Earth continues to be ruled by them like this, then there might come a day when the world will enter the apocalypse due to internal strife, let alone going up against external enemies. McGraw nodded. The Yellow Army, Black Army, Cyan Army, and Red Army are all unstable factors. They are powerful but temperamental. All of them should be brought under our control. Earth will only have the best future if the Grey Army unifies the four seas. Just as the few people from the Grey Army were conversing in low voices, the Witch of Trepidation turned her head, and her cold gaze swept fiercely through them like a blade. "You guys, do you have any objections?" the Witch of Trepidation said coldly. As she spoke, a faint yellow glow extended out from the ground, and countless terrifying scenes flashed before the few people from the Grey Army. They had no choice but to summon all of their willpower to resist. Although they hated the existence of the Yellow Army, the Witch of Trepidation was a general-level character. Her abilities were far above theirs, and McGraw did not dare to show any disrespect. Moreover, McGraw's heart trembled at the mere thought of the Witch of Trepidation's deeds. She was a truly lawless character. Before the 13 commanders sat down for a peace talk and set up all sorts of rules, the entire Earth was in a state of chaos. In the Yellow Army, a character like the Witch of Trepidation was lawless and extremely brutal. She had even charged into a city and massacred over 1 million people in the city after killing a modernized army of 100,000 people. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they were all executed. Over 10,000 people had their bodies pierced by wooden rods and were impaled into the ground. This demoness, whether it was her strength or her methods, made people tremble in fear. The Major General McGraw said, "Madam, we're only discussing the topic of discussion this time around." The Witch of Trepidation stroked her chin and suddenly said, "Grade and I will discuss the ownership of this page of the Book of Wisdom. Everyone else can scram." Flames of fury rose in McGraw's heart, but he still held it in and said, "Madam, the discovery of each page of the Book of Wisdom requires the 13 armies to discuss it together and broadcast it live. Everyone can bear witness to it. Unless they give up, they have the right to participate. These are the rules set by the 13 commanders." The Witch of Trepidation let out a cold laugh and said, "You want to talk about rules with me?" As she spoke, the air was filled with flashing yellow light spots. McGraw felt that the Witch of Trepidation before him seemed to have suddenly become extremely massive. It was as if she had reached the clouds and would be able to trample him to death with a single step. Endless terror gushed up in his heart, causing him to break out in perspiration and tremble incessantly. However, McGraw was a major general after all, so he still guarded his mind tightly. He gritted his teeth and said, "Madam, it's useless to talk to me if you want us to leave. Please discuss this with Lord Huihe." Huihe was the Grey Army's commander, one of the 13 commanders. Hearing this, the cold gleam in the Witch of Trepidation's eyes gleamed. "You dare to use Huihe to pressure me?" McGraw braced himself and said, "I wouldn't dare. But these are the rules. Even if Lord Huihe were here, he would still have to abide by them." "Ha ha ha ha, then get Huihe to come and look for me." The Witch of Trepidation's eyes gleamed brightly, and the spiritual light of trepidation gushed out like turbulent waves. However, it was restrained tightly and charged out toward all the members of the Grey Army present. With the Witch of Trepidation's general-level abilities, the spiritual light of trepidation that she unleashed at full power was enough to scare the humans in an entire city into lunatics. Right now, when the spiritual light of trepidation landed on the few Grey Army's warriors, they were immediately pressured to the point of breaking down. Even the few ordinary people next to them were affected. They stood up, trembling incessantly. Their eyes turned white, and their skin gradually dissolved, turning into a muscular monster that let out incomprehensible roars. These were the sorrowful howling monsters that were driven by fear after being infected by the spiritual light of trepidation. Other than being able to scare people crazy and suppress their will, the spiritual light of trepidation could also infect them, turning them into various monsters to create panic. Chapter 9:21. Only McGraw and Ormodo, who were in the lead, were resisting with their major general-level willpower. However, their bodies were already trembling, and they were about to reach their limits. The other television workers were watching the scene in the conference room while trembling in fear. The Witch of Trepidation's actions caused countless people to be filled with righteous indignation, yet there was nothing they could do. There were definitely no more than 20 people on Earth who could suppress this Yellow Army's general. It's that demon again. Is there no one who can stop her? Who can stop it? She's a general to begin with, and she has the Yellow Army backing her up. Right now, the fear of several billion people across the world is strengthening their power. When many people saw the Witch of Trepidation's actions and abilities, they could not help but feel terrified. This was also the habit of the Yellow Army, from the commander to the ordinary warriors. They would constantly proclaim how terrifying they were. It was because to them, fear was power. As the television kept broadcasting what the Witch of Terror had done, the spiritual light of terror in the venue seemed to have become stronger. McGraw's and Odomdo's skin also started to show signs of melting. It was as if they would be infected by the spiritual light of terror at any time and turn into wailing monsters. Right at this moment, a gray light lit up. It was like a huge gray tide surging over. In the blink of an eye, it engulfed the entire venue, dyeing every inch of the air gray. An incomparably vigorous and resonant voice rang out from within the gray light. "Woman, this isn't the mountain range of despair. It's not your place to behave atrociously." As he spoke, a middle-aged man in a gray suit with his hair slicked back slowly stepped into the hall. Seeing the man's appearance, countless people in front of their televisions immediately exclaimed, "It's the Grey Army's Qin Wang. It's actually him this time." It seems that the Grey Army doesn't wish to give up on this page of the Book of Wisdom so easily either. Seeing Qin Wang's appearance, a hint of wariness flashed in the Witch of Trepidation's eyes. She said coldly, "Qin Wang, didn't your Grey Army give up this time around? Are you going to go back on your words?" Qin Wang let out a cold snort and said, "What right do you have to interfere with my Grey Army's decision?" As Fang Xinjian spoke, gray energy encompassed the few people from the Grey Army, and all the spiritual lights of terror disintegrated. Being enveloped by the gray light, the Witch of Trepidation felt that everything in the entire conference room seemed to be under the control of the other party. Even her spiritual light of trepidation was unable to invade it. As expected of someone with outstanding talent in the Grey Army. To think that he has improved so much in just a few years. The Witch of Trepidation's aura weakened slightly. She was merely spreading fear and expressing her stance during the meeting. She did not plan on fighting to the death with the Grey Army. In fact, even if the other party was unable to fend off the Grey spiritual light earlier, she would only throw McGraw and the others out and not really turn them into mournful howling monsters. However, even though the Witch of Trepidation had retreated, the Qin King was not willing to let her off so easily. He said, "Witch of Trepidation, you've injured my Grey Army's warriors for no reason. You've already violated the 1-3 agreement from back then. Do you have anything to say?" The 1-3 agreement had been jointly formulated by the 13 armies back then. It was for the sake of fending off external enemies and preventing internal strife. From that day onwards, no one in the army was allowed to attack each other. As for killing other army members, they would be attacked by all the army commanders. However, the 13 armies had 13 different personalities. There were far too many contradictions and conflicts, and it was not something that could be suppressed by a single agreement. It merely reduced the number of killings. There were still many battles that needed to be fought. However, due to the Grey Army's desire for control and ambition, they had always been working hard to maintain discipline, trying their best to uphold the 1-3 agreement. The Witch of Trepidation's eyes narrowed slightly, and hints of spiritual light of trepidation flashed on her body. "Then what do you want? Apologize to them and then follow me back. You'll be detained for 1 month. Dream on." The Witch of Trepidation let out an enraged bellow, and yellow light intertwined together, turning into a monster with several hundred eyes, countless mouths, and many sharp teeth growing out of its skin. It was as if countless monsters had been fused together. Countless people in front of their televisions cried out in astonishment at the sight of this monster. Some of the more cowardly ones even fainted from fright. This is the Witch of Trepidation's abrupt transformation monster. Just its appearance alone can bring about an effect similar to the spiritual light of trepidation. It also has the power to destroy an entire city. However, faced with the sudden appearance of the abrupt transformation monster, Qin Wang did not panic. He stretched out his hand, and the surrounding gray light turned into a myriad of gray air currents, instantly restraining the abrupt transformation monster. It was as if the King of Whales was trying to catch a huge whale. The yellow abrupt transformation monster started to struggle crazily, but it was locked onto by the gray air currents that were getting increasingly tighter and tighter. In the end, with a rumble, it was twisted into a myriad of light spots and disappeared. A hint of fury flashed in the Witch of Trepidation's eyes, but she did not flare up. Right now, the power that Qin Wang displayed had already surpassed hers. McGraw was pleasantly surprised. The ring's power that Qin Wang controls is above that of the Witch of Trepidation. That's why he was able to kill the abrupt transformation monster in a head-on clash. Outside the televisions, countless people were cheering. Many of them who had a feud with the Witch of Trepidation hoped that Qin Wang would make another move and kill this abrupt transformation monster. However, Qin Wang would not do that. At the next moment, gray light wrapped around the Witch of Trepidation's body, and Qin Wang said calmly, "After the meeting ends, I'll have to trouble you to come with me." The Witch of Trepidation merely smiled coldly. "You can say these words to our commander later." Qin Wang's expression was cold. With a wave of his hand, streams of gray light encompassed the Witch of Trepidation completely, leaving only a pair of furious eyes that could look at the meeting hall. Although the remaining members of the Yellow Army felt indignant, they were helpless. They could only secretly contact their upper echelon and wait for their response. With Qin Wang's arrival, the entire meeting hall became orderly once again. Many officials were carried out, and the order of the meeting hall returned to normal. Simultaneously, the battle in the battlefield continued to be transmitted out through all sorts of electromagnetic signals, giving rise to all sorts of fights and negotiations between the Grey Army and the Yellow Army. The Yellow Army spread terror while the Grey Army maintained order. The two of them were mortal enemies to begin with, and the fight between them was extremely ferocious. The other armies that had given up on this meeting were more than happy to watch from the sidelines. However, in the meeting hall, Qin Wang was looking coldly at the ceiling. It was as if his gaze was piercing through the layers of reinforced concrete and looking at the sky outside. Simultaneously, it was as if the entire sky was experiencing a solar eclipse. Darkness gradually encompassed a large part of the city. Countless black air currents engulfed the sky and cut across the streets, letting out shrill cries. Even more black air currents passed through the windows and doors, gathering together in the meeting hall and turning into a blurry human figure. Chapter 922. Hello everyone. This is the report brought to you by Quiney Lacey from International Online, a female reporter said while standing outside the hall. A female reporter stood outside the hall and said, "The main topic of the 13 armies meeting this time around is the ownership of the new page of the Book of Wisdom. Other than the White Army, Black Army, Gray Army, and Yellow Army, all the other armies have chosen to give up. Just now, the Yellow Armies which of trepidation fought with the Gray Armies Qin Wang. She was no match for him and was detained." Just as the female reporter was reporting the situation in the hall, the sky suddenly turned dark. Waves of black even encompassed the atmosphere, and the sun's rays gradually disappeared. Countless reporters and cameramen immediately pointed their cameras toward the strange phenomenon in the sky. A reporter shouted, "It's Grade. The Black Army's Grade is here. Please don't leave. We'll bring you the latest report regarding this meeting." Simultaneously, most of the news footage had already been cut to the hall. Black air currents gushed forth, gathering together and turning into a blurry human figure. At the sight of this scene, Qin Wang's countenance was extremely grim as he said, "Greetings, Commander." The black figure opened its mouth, and there seemed to be light flashing in it. "Where are the people from the White Army? Where is the Book of Wisdom? Where is the White Army? Where is the Book of Wisdom? Where is the White Army? Where is the Book of Wisdom?" As he spoke, there seemed to be several hundred or even 1,000 voices ringing out. There were men and women, old and young. It was as if countless people were speaking at the same time, and there was a strange disposition to it. This was the will of the countless black ring possessors that Grade had engulfed. The wills of all the Black Army's possessors were gathered together, constantly biting and fighting against each other, forming an existence that was similar to a collective consciousness. The strongest among them was known as Grade. Hearing the other party's straightforward words, Qin Wang said, "The ownership of the new page of the Book of Wisdom can only be decided after a discussion." However, before Qin Wang could continue, a myriad of bellows rang out from the black figure. "Mine. This page belongs to me. Gray Army, are you going to make an enemy out of me?" Countless bellows reverberated in the sky above the hall, causing the entire building to tremble. Countless people were shivering amidst the seething black air current. Out of the 13 armies, the Yellow Army might be the most brutal. However, the Black Army was the most unreasonable. These consciousnesses that were devouring and fighting each other were like a madman. If they were not careful, they could cause the deaths of tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people. To mortals, rather than saying that the Black Army was a group of people or a single person, it was more like some sort of moving natural disaster. However, Qin Wang put out his hand and gray energy rose up, encompassing everyone present and protecting them. Simultaneously, he shouted with all his might, "Lord Grade, even the commander can't snatch the Book of Wisdom as he wishes. Each newly discovered page of the Book of Wisdom must be discussed by the 13 armies before the ownership can be decided. This is also a rule that you agreed to back then." However, Grade seemed as if he did not hear it at all. Countless black ghostly shadows kept on darting out from his body, shooting into midair before darting back. "I said, this is mine. You promised me. And now you're going back on your word." Qin Wang's countenance started to turn grim. On one hand, the black air currents kept on colliding against his energy, giving him an immense pressure. On the other hand, Grade did not take him seriously at all. All of this was transmitted to the countless viewers in the other armies through the television broadcast. In outer space, in the huge space station, the Gold Army's leader, Edward. Right now, he was still busy with his own experiments, but he would occasionally throw a glance at the television broadcast when he was free. When he saw Grade descending from the sky and suppressing Qin Wang, he let out a cold snort, and the corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a disdainful smile. It was unknown who he was feeling disdain towards. Elsewhere, in the distant Despair mountain range, a huge ancient castle stood on a cliff. Occasionally, there would be agonizing cries ringing out from the ancient castle, exuding a horrifying aura. The Yellow Army's leader, the king of trepidation Balhouse, propped up his chin and looked at the television broadcast. Next to him was the Abomination Sovereign, a general-level character from the Yellow Army. He had terrifying scars all over his body, making him look like a sewn-up zombie. He said, "These hypocrites from the Grey Army are really going overboard. To think that they dare to detain the Witch of Trepidation directly. They don't take us seriously at all." The Dark Current was a monster who was completely encompassed in a yellow robe. Only endless darkness could be seen under the robe. The Dark Current said, "We've always been mortal enemies. But this is good as well. In any case, we both want to test Grade's limits and see how far he has cleared his will. Since the Grey Army is willing to stand up for him, then we'll let them stand up for him. It's just that with this, the people in the world will have less respect for us." Due to his unique characteristics, the Black Army's Grade had always been the most unstable factor among the 13 armies. He would occasionally go crazy and occasionally be rational. He was like a time bomb that could be detonated at any moment. Right now, Grade had reached the most crucial step in clearing his excess consciousness. This naturally attracted the attention of the various armies. Many people were unwilling to make an enemy out of Grade, but there were also many people who were unwilling to see him regain his rationality and become much stronger. It was because the Black Army represented greed. It was a greed that wanted to possess and engulf everything. The threat that Grade would bring after regaining his rationality was something that many people were unwilling to see. Therefore, both the Yellow Army and the Grey Army sent out a person at the same time. Their goal was to test Grade's progress. Elsewhere, the world's tallest building, which had over 800 floors, reached into the clouds and looked down on the land. In the hall on the top floor, the Grey Army's leader, a middle-aged man who looked ordinary, was sitting on a sofa, watching the broadcast on the television. Next to him, the female secretary said, "Sir, do we need to send people to reinforce Lord Qin-Wang? There's no need for that yet." He stared at the television and said, "Right now is a good opportunity to see Grade's situation clearly. Moreover, with the Qin King's talent, even Grade wouldn't be able to easily injure him or even kill him. Then what about the Book of Wisdom? If Grade hasn't reached that stage yet, then we'll give it to him first," he said calmly. "In any case, someone will be even more anxious than us. There's no need to fight it out with this freak." Chapter 923. Just as the many influences were secretly guessing Grade's situation. In the hall, Qin-Wang continued to persuade Grade to calm down. The Witch of Trepidation looked on coldly from the side, and a hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. "This is a lunatic freak. Does the Grey Army still hope to be able to control him?" Faced with Qin-Wang's explanation and persuasion, the black silhouette became even more ferocious. It continued to let out roars, and the black streams of air became darker and darker, like spilled ink. "Lord Grade, please remain calm. You won't be able to resolve things like this." "Calm down?" the black figure bellowed. "Try having several hundred people quarreling in your mind every day. Let's see if you can remain calm." With Grade's bellow, the black air currents turned into a strong gust of wind that descended from the sky, pressing down toward Qin-Wang. This Black Army's commander, a monster born from the engulfing of countless people's consciousnesses, finally could not hold it in any longer and made a move. Looking at the gushing black air currents, Qin-Wang frowned and slapped out with his palm. Gray light formed a huge palm that clashed fiercely with the black air currents. However, with just this one clash, the disparity between the two of them was immediately revealed. The huge gray palm instantly crumbled, and Qin-Wang was forced to retreat 5 steps. With each step he took, his face would turn paler, and his spirit and will would also weaken. After taking 5 steps, his countenance was already as pale as a sheet of paper, and his countenance was extremely grim. It was because streams of black air currents started bellowing crazily before him, turning into countless human figures that came gushing out. It was as if a myriad of ghosts were wailing and the netherworld was descending. Qin Wang's countenance changed. He knew that this person before him was truly infuriated. Streams of gray light rose up, filling up every inch of space within a range of 100 meters. At this moment, all the molecular movements in the world seemed to be held hostage. At this moment, Qin Wang was like a divine king who controlled the entire world. All the physical movements in the world seemed to be under his control. Immediately after, Qin Wang made a blocking action with one hand while facing the countless ghostly figures. In that instant, all the black ghostly figures froze in midair, unable to move. They were like flies that had been caught in amber. Even the black air currents that filled up the sky within 100 meters came to a standstill, stopping all their movement. It was as if time had come to a standstill. Seeing such a situation, everyone present revealed a look of surprise. The Witch of Trepidation's countenance changed as well. This is Hui He's ultimate move, World to the Heart. To think that Qin Wang's strength has reached such a level. Such means are already comparable to the White Army and the Red Army's commanders. In the space station, the Gold Army's commander Edward was also slightly surprised. He said calmly, "Interesting." In the Despair Valley, the King of Trepidation let out a cold snort. "We're really lucky. However, this will only infuriate Grade even more." On the television screen, countless people saw Qin Wang stretch out his hand, and everything in the world seemed to come to a standstill. Countless people exclaimed at this strange scene. However, Qin Wang's expression was definitely not relaxed. In fact, after unleashing the world abides to the heart, his expression became increasingly grim. Droplets of cold sweat kept dripping down from his forehead. It was because, under his control, the black air currents kept on struggling and even started to tremble slightly. Qin Wang could clearly sense a surge of soaring fury contained within them. At the next moment, 2 streams of blood flowed down from Qin Wang's eyes. He let out a stifled snort and retreated repeatedly. The space that had come to a standstill also returned to its original state. The endless black air currents came crashing down, as if wanting to tear apart all the matter in the hall. At that moment, Qin Wang brought out a ring. It was a gray-colored ring that was exuding soul-stirring ripples of power. As the ring appeared, the surrounding air trembled slightly and a man's voice rang out. "That's enough, Grade. We'll just give you the Book of Wisdom this time around." The person who spoke was the Grey Army's leader, Hui He. Clearly, this strongest expert in the Grey Army was already able to control the ring's energy from several thousand lis away. Even if Qin Wang were to hold onto his ring, he would be able to control the powers within it. His actual body could even borrow powers from several thousand lis away, so it did not matter whether he was wearing the ring or not. Hearing the word black, the black air currents immediately stopped and were slowly absorbed into the black human figure. Hui He's appearance seemed to have caused Grade to regain a hint of clarity, and his figure also became clearer. "Foolish probing," Grade said coldly. Grade said coldly, "Once I really lose control, it'll mean the deaths of several 100 million people. Hui He, don't test my patience." "Ha!" Hui He's voice rang out from the ring. "Grade, I'm also worried for the safety of all mankind. Please understand our painstaking efforts." "Humph!" Grade trembled fiercely. It was as if he was a black hole, slowly drawing in the endless black aura into his body. He also turned into a young man who was wrapped up in black long robes and casually found a place to sit down. "Where are the people from the White Army? How long more before they arrive?" Hui He instructed, "Give them a call and tell them to hurry up. Are they going to make so many of us wait for them?" 20 minutes later, everyone in and out of the venue felt a little anxious. It was because hints of distortions and savageness kept flashing on Grade's face. It was as if he was going to lose control of the consciousness in his body soon. Hui He had already left, and Qin Wang was still in charge of the Gray Army. Seeing Grade's situation, he immediately gave out instructions: go and contact the people from the White Army again. What's going on with them? To think that they can be late under such circumstances? Just then, a Gray Army's warrior ran over and said, "Sir, we've found the White Army's representative." Simultaneously, the various television stations kept on reporting the situation of the conference. Based on the latest information, the White Army's representative has yet to arrive. This might be the White Army expressing some dissatisfaction. After all, they don't have the capabilities to protect this page of the Book of Wisdom. Professor Loriton, the White Army's commander, has changed this time around. It's said that the new commander, Fang Xinjian, has powers that surpass Priest Longmai's. Does he not have the right to snatch the Book of Wisdom either? In the live broadcast studio, a silver-haired middle-aged lady nodded and said, "The current situation of the 13 armies can be said to be one where a slight change in one part will affect the overall situation. The White Army's influence is considered to be at the lower end of the 13 armies to begin with. Even if they change their commander this time around, it won't be of much use. As for the new commander, Fang Xinjian, his strength is even more of a mystery. However, my personal guess is that he might not be as powerful as everyone thinks." Chapter 924. Oh? Why is that so? The female host asked. If he's really that amazing, why haven't we heard of him in the past? The female professor shook her head and said, "It's very possible that he was pushed out by Priest Longmai as his successor. In order to build up support for him, Priest Longmai even sacrificed himself as a stepping stone. There's only one reason for such a situation. Priest Longmai's lifespan is probably coming to an end. Since then, not only has the White Army not gotten stronger, but it might even be weaker than before." The countless viewers in front of their televisions nodded silently, feeling that what the professor said made a lot of sense. The female professor continued, "Moreover, the situation has already been decided. In order to maintain the stability of Commander Grade's situation, it's impossible for this page of the Book of Wisdom to be handed over to someone else. Handing this page of the Book of Wisdom to Grade has clearly been agreed upon by all the armies. Faced with such a situation, the White Army won't be able to reject it. With Grade's powers, once he goes crazy, it'll be like several thousand or 10,000 nuclear bombs going out of control. No one will be able to accept such an outcome. Therefore, I dare to bet that the new page of the Book of Wisdom will definitely be handed over to Grade." On the televisions, countless hosts, experts, and professors were analyzing the situation, reporting every single detail of the meeting. However, at the next moment, the images on the various television stations changed. Breaking news. The White Army's representative has been found. Right now, the White Army's representative is being escorted to the meeting venue. Will the White Army's representative be the new commander this time around? Is this new commander finally going to walk out from the mysteries? Outside the meeting venue, a black sedan came to a slow stop. Countless cameras were instantly aimed at the sedan, and everyone was waiting for the person to get out of the car. A short moment later, the car door opened, and a blonde young lady walked out slowly. It was the White Army's newcomer, Jessica. Her blonde hair was tied into a ponytail, and she was wearing a white priest robe. She looked like a fresh and refined little white flower. She was hugging a long sword in a silver scabbard. The long sword was completely silver in color, giving off an extremely sharp feeling. Jessica hugged the long sword with great force, as if it was her only reliance. As soon as Jessica appeared, countless TV stations frantically searched for her information. "Hello, everyone. The person appearing on the screen is North America's famous daughter from a wealthy family, Jessica Lehman. No one would have expected that this North American queen, the fashion world's heavenly queen, would have passed the White Army's test. This time around, the White Army has sent out a newcomer. It seems that they've completely given up on the fight for the Book of Wisdom. In everyone's opinion, the White Army had completely given up. The reason why they had sent out a female disciple was probably because those seniors were unwilling to embarrass themselves. In a luxurious manner in North America, a middle-aged man looked at Jessica on the television screen in astonishment. Why did Jessica join the White Army? Jessica's mother said, "Isn't that great? Jessica has become a supernatural being. This is a good thing for the entire family." Jessica's younger brother smiled coldly and said, "How intense are the conflicts between the 13 armies? If she gets involved like this, she might bring harm to the entire family." Jessica's father sighed. The expression on his face was extremely complicated. He was happy and worried at the same time. Right now, Jessica was feeling extremely nervous. This time around, they were going to be facing the major characters from the other armies, and the White Army had sent her alone. How could she not be nervous? She could only hug the silver longsword tightly, still recalling the instructions Fang Xinjian had given her as she walked toward the meeting hall. Behind Jessica, the Grey Army's Major General Odom grabbed her arm and ran toward the meeting hall at high speed. "Everyone is waiting for you. Hurry up." Jessica's arm hurt from being dragged by him. She shouted, "Let go of me! You're hurting me!" Odom let out a cold snort. "Do you know how many people are waiting for you? To think that the White Army has only sent you here alone, this is really... Humph." He threw a cold glance toward Jessica but did not say anything in the end. Then he dragged Jessica along and quickly walked into the meeting hall. Almost at the moment she walked into the meeting hall, everyone's gazes turned toward Jessica. Grade was the first to say, "Someone from the White Army? Where's the Book of Wisdom? Where's that page?" Everyone looked at Jessica, as if waiting for her to bring out that page from the Book of Wisdom. Having never been stared at by so many extraordinary humans before, Jessica also felt a little nervous. She hugged her longsword tightly and said softly, "I didn't bring it with me." "You didn't bring it?" Qin Wang looked at Jessica and said, a little displeased, "Is the White Army going to go back on its word? Could it be that you guys are thinking of keeping this page of the Book of Wisdom to yourself?" Grade's gaze narrowed, and he glared fiercely at Jessica with eyes that emitted a dangerous aura. Jessica gulped, feeling extremely nervous, and all the hair on her body seemed to be standing up. Only the feeling of coldness coming from the silver longsword seemed to give her a hint of confidence. Under the gazes of countless people and the pressure from Grade and Qin Wang, Jessica said, "Lord Fang Xinjian said that he wants this page of the Book of Wisdom. He also wants all the pages from the other books of wisdom." Arrogant. Hearing those words, Qin Wang frowned. The ferocious gleam on Grade's face burst out, and streams of black aura darted out from his body, causing countless people to panic. They were all afraid that he would go out of control. Therefore, countless people present glared at Jessica and scolded, "Are you guys crazy? Shut up and hand over the Book of Wisdom. What if Grade goes out of control again? Are you trying to get us killed?" In the North American continent, Jessica's family also fell into silence. After the earlier scene was broadcasted on the television, Jessica's father's face turned ice-cold. Jessica's younger brother's face was filled with horror. Damn it, this foolish woman. What is she doing? Our entire clan is going to die because of her." In the hall, Grade had already stood up. At the sight of this scene, Qin Wang immediately stood up as well. He rushed up to Jessica and said furiously, "Shut up! Do you know that you've gotten into great trouble?" In the distance, black aura kept on extending out from Grade's body, and there seemed to be countless people bellowing in void space. Jessica was like a delicate white flower, shivering when faced with the prowess of the two experts. Countless people in front of their television sets were scolding Jessica for being foolish and the White Army for being selfish. Despite this, she still remembered Fang Xinjian's instructions and placed the silver longsword on the ground respectfully. Qin Wang frowned and asked, "What are you trying to do?" Jessica did not reply. She just put her palms together and said respectfully, "Please unsheathe your treasure." Chapter 925. Everyone who saw this scene was slightly stunned. They did not understand why Jessica would be so respectful and serious towards a long sword. She even prayed and kowtowed, performing the proper etiquette. Just when everyone was puzzled, a soft sound came from the longsword. The silver longsword lying on the ground moved slowly, without any visible force. It moved out of the scabbard and revealed a trace of silver light. The king of Qin narrowed his eyes and glanced at the longsword in bewilderment. However, he could not sense any extraordinary power from the longsword. This was the truth. The longsword was Fang Xinjian's accompanying sword, one of the 4 great divine swords, the Panwei sword. In the beginning, this Panwei sword had been modified from the Mountainous Sea Dynasty's Panwu divine armor. Later on, Fang Xinjian's light pursuit sword intent was channeled into it. In terms of its foundation, it was the strongest out of the 4 divine swords. Later on, it was reforged by Fang Xinjian using the heavenly upper extremity sword physique. It possessed an almost indestructible body and could be said to be the strongest sword in the world. However, his body was not powered by the ring's energy, so it was no wonder that Qin Wang and the others could not sense how powerful it was. Seeing that the longsword had only moved out slightly from its scabbard and that there were no other abnormalities, the Grey Army's Major General Odom said coldly, trying to act mysterious, "Is the White Army thinking of relying on this lousy sword to protect the Book of Wisdom? Are you kidding me?" Another Major General from the Grey Army, McGraw, said, "Today is an important meeting for the White, Yellow, Black, and Grey Armies to discuss the whereabouts of the Book of Wisdom. However, the White Army isn't willing to hand over the Book of Wisdom and wants to keep this page to themselves. Isn't this against the rules?" As everyone spoke up one after another, more and more people stood out to criticize the White Army and Jessica. That's right. The White Army is completely breaking the rules by doing this. Originally, the purpose of holding a meeting to discuss and settle the ownership of each page of the Book of Wisdom peacefully was to reduce conflicts and ensure the safety of Earth. Right now, the White Army is hogging the pages for their own selfish reasons. What does this mean? You must hand over the Book of Wisdom. Otherwise, the White Army will become enemies with the other 12 armies. You guys are destroying the peace of the entire Earth. I strongly request for the White Army's new commander to come out and apologize. Right now, in order to fight against the negative emotions in his mind and prevent his powers from destroying Earth, Lord Grade has given up his entire life. Right now, only the Book of Wisdom can help him. To think that you guys want to monopolize it? What is his motive?" All kinds of verbal attacks came one after another like a storm, and Jessica was the only one who endured it silently, like a small boat in front of a tsunami. Although the countless viewers in front of their televisions pitied the weak young lady, they could empathize with everyone's criticism. In their opinion, it was true that the White Army had destroyed Earth's stability and unity by refusing to hand over the Book of Wisdom for their own selfish reasons. Qin Wang, Grade, and the other army's commanders watched all of this silently. Of course, they were not hoping for any reaction from Jessica. Instead, they were waiting for the White Army's reaction. Qin Wang's gaze turned increasingly cold as he laughed coldly inwardly. "White Army, are you guys just going to watch on like this? Are you trying to act shamelessly?" Jessica also felt increasingly nervous. Although she had great trust in Fang Xinjian's abilities, just like the other members of the White Army, she was also worried if the longsword Fang Xinjian had casually given her would be able to protect her before so many important characters from the armies. Just then, the people present were not satisfied with just continuing to speak. A junior-level warrior from the Grey Army grabbed out, and Grey energy turned into a palm that was the size of a small car, grabbing out toward Jessica. Since the White Army is so stubborn, Then we'll capture you and bring you to the sacred white crevice. We'll personally ask for the Book of Wisdom." Just as the gray palm was about to grab Jessica, the long sword that had been lying quietly on the ground suddenly moved. It floated up and blocked before Jessica. At the next moment, a silver sword light was unleashed from the long sword. A stream of sword light pierced through the air, mincing the gray palm into nothingness. The sword light did not stop and continued to slash out. The gray warrior who had made a move in the distance let out an agonizing cry. His body was swept through in that instant, and he fell to the ground while covered in blood. Everyone looked at this scene in astonishment. It was as if they had not expected that the other party would deal a member of the Grey Army with serious injuries. At the sight of this scene, the Grey Army's Major General, McGraw, frowned and said furiously, "There are so many experts from the armies looking over here, yet you still dare to commit murder here? Is the White Army really going to make an enemy out of the other 12 armies?" Jessica lowered her head silently, and her entire body was encompassed by the silver sword light. "We won't be handing over the Book of Wisdom. If you guys want to take it, then come and take it yourself. But we'll kill whoever makes a move." "Ridiculous." McGraw let out a cold snort and gray light burst out. Streams of gray light turned into many light swords that pierced out toward Jessica like a meteor shower. A myriad of gray light swords shot out, and the Panway longsword trembled slightly. A sword cry rang out, and a light sword shot out explosively from the Panway longsword. In that instant, the myriad of light swords shattered, and the sword light swept through McGraw's body, slashing his body at the waist. With a pff sound, McGraw's upper body fell to the ground, and blood spurted out from his lower body like a fountain, creating a blood flower that reached over 3 meters high. At the sight of this scene, the eyes of all the Grey Army's warriors turned bloodshot. It was as if blood was going to drip out from their eyes. How long had it been? Ever since the 1-3 agreement was signed, it had been a long time since there had been a battle to the death between the 13 armies on Earth. Although there would occasionally be fights and conflicts, under the suppression of the 13 commanders, there had never been any deaths among the army's warriors. To think that someone had killed a major general from the Grey Army before the several billion people on Earth. How could the people from the Grey Army not be infuriated? The Witch of Trepidation also revealed an astonished expression. These people from the White Army are too daring. Are they crazy? Right now, she was looking at Jessica with a gaze filled with pity. This woman is dead meat. I wonder how the people from the Grey Army will execute her. Audacious. They're really audacious. At the top floor of the world's tallest building, the heaven-connecting tower, the eyes of the Grey Army's leader, Hui He, were also filled with fury. This woman must die. Simultaneously, all the Grey Army's warriors in the hall unleashed their Grey Ring energies without needing Hui He's orders. They turned into all sorts of firearms, sabers, swords, huge palms, wild beasts, and other means of attack that they were familiar with. They smashed out toward Jessica. Chapter 9:26. One had to pay the price for killing the members of the Grey Army. Amongst the many warriors in the Grey Army, only Qin Wang remained calm. Although he was also furious at the other party's vicious means, he could tell that the silver sword was extraordinary. Right now, he was going all out, looking at everyone's attacks, ready to make a move at any moment to fend off the silver sword's counterattack. The gray energy materialized into various means of attack. There were modernized rocket launchers, extremely sharp blades that could slice through tanks, huge dragons, elephants, and all sorts of wild beasts with great strength and great toughness that could charge against armored troops. There was also a huge palm with an extremely condensed gray glow that had the mountains, rivers, sun, moon, and the circulation of the Milky Way carved on it. Each of these warriors in the Grey Army had different cultural backgrounds and ethnic lineages. Therefore, the methods they used to materialize energy for battle were also different. However, there was one thing they all had in common. They were all similarly powerful. Right now, when they joined forces to attack, the prowess they unleashed could turn the buildings on an entire street into dregs. Looking at the incoming attacks, Jessica closed her eyes, and her body started to tremble slightly. Although she trusted Fang Xinjian, she was just an ordinary person previously. Right now, she was unable to maintain her calm when facing the attacks from so many extraordinary powers. At the instant she closed her eyes, the Panwei sword once again trembled slightly. A stream of silver sword light shot out from the sword, piercing through the air like a laser beam. It shot out a distance of several hundred meters, passing through layers of walls and arriving in the sky outside the building. At the next moment, the laser-like sword light suddenly swept out. Wherever the sword light passed by, the rocket launchers would be crushed, and the gray blades would be split into two, dissipating in the air. The ferocious and enraged huge beasts were sliced into pieces like cheese, turning into light spots that filled up the sky. The huge gray palm was completely shattered. Almost in the blink of an eye, the overwhelming attacks were broken by this stream of sword light. Everyone's hearts thumped furiously. However, the sword light did not stop at all. It continued to slash out toward the Grey Army's warriors. At this moment, Qin Wang finally reacted. "How dare you!" As he shouted, gray energy surged out from his body. Everything abides to the heart was activated once again, and the space seemed to be frozen inch by inch. Wherever the energy tide passed by, everything would come to a standstill. However, when the frozen space extended out toward the sword light, the light pursuit sword, which the Panwei sword had shot out, was not affected at all. It swept out and sliced through the gray energy currents. It was like a table knife slicing through tofu. In the blink of an eye, another 5 warriors from the Grey Army were slashed at the waist. At the sight of this scene, Qin Wang's eyes were filled with rage. The gray energy abruptly condensed, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a drill that was the size of a train. The drill spun violently, bringing about extremely violent gales that blew away the mortals in the surroundings. It was as if they were ants being blown away, and all of them crashed into the walls. The gray drill let out a sonic boom and shot toward Jessica at over 10 times the speed of sound. Right now, Qin Wang was really infuriated. Not knowing the background of the silver sword and not being able to stop it, he chose to kill Jessica to save the remaining warriors from the Grey Army. The extremely large drill that was condensed from gray energy could instantly drill a big hole through an aircraft carrier and sink it. Right now, it was being used to deal with an extremely weak girl. The contrast between the two of them was like using a cannon to kill a mosquito. However, just then, another stream of silver sword light shot out from the Panwei sword, sweeping out toward the huge drill that Qin Wang had released. The weak sword light looked like an ordinary laser light. When it swept across the ferocious drill, one could not sense any prowess from it at all. However, regardless of whether it was the Witch of Trepidation, Grade, or anyone else who was watching this battle, none of them would underestimate the prowess of this stream of sword light. However, they had not expected that this sword light was even more terrifying than they had imagined. At the next instant, the drill that had been swept by the sword light suddenly shattered. It was as if it had been slashed by countless sharp swords, turning into fragments that filled the air. Then it shattered once again, turning into countless light spots and dissipating completely. Immediately after, Qin Wang retreated crazily. It was because the sword light that represented death and destruction was already sweeping toward his body. Rumble! It was as if several hundred elephants were moving at the same time. With Qin Wang's explosive retreat, he immediately knocked away countless walls and steel bars, causing the entire hall to tremble. Countless ordinary people were thrown off their feet. Amidst Qin Wang's explosive retreat, streams of gray energy turned into all sorts of sabers, spears, and staffs, attacking the sword light at a speed that was over 10 times that of supersonic speed. However, no matter what kind of attacks they were, they were all slashed apart when they arrived before the sword light. It was as if there was nothing in the world that could fend off this sword light. It was useless, useless, useless. No matter what kind of attack it was, it seemed to be meaningless before this stream of sword light. That stream of sword light seemed to be deliberately toying with Qin Wang, slashing out toward him slowly inch by inch. It made him feel a terror as if he had no control over his life. At this moment, a hint of terror finally flashed in Qin Wang's eyes. However, just then, the gray ring that he was carrying with him soared into the air, and an unimaginable amount of gray energy extended out like the mountains and seas. It was like gray seawater, instantly engulfing the space within a range of 1,000 meters. In the center of this gray seawater, an extremely dense stream of gray energy gathered to form a human figure. It was the Gray Army's leader, Hui He. With the help of his ring that Qin Wang was carrying, this strongest expert in the Gray Army had traversed several thousand lis and descended across space. At the instant he appeared, he put out one of his hands and made an interception motion. The stream of sword light that was slashing out toward Qin Wang was encompassed by countless gray light rays and gradually came to a stop. Countless people were astonished at the sight of this scene. The sword light, which had slashed through everything from the moment it appeared and was almost invincible, was still stopped by Hui He. Hui He, the Gray Army's commander. Is he going to make a move as well? If Fang Xinjian were here, he would be able to discover that the power that Hui He displayed was about at Tier 4 of the divine level. However, the most amazing thing was that his power had already reached the microscopic level. This was why he was able to fend off the light pursuit sword. Hui He's face was filled with killing intent, and his eyes were filled with fury. It was because at the same time that he descended, all of the other Gray Army's warriors had already been killed. Fang Xinjian, to think that you dare to kill members of our Gray Army. We won't let this matter rest just like that. Hearing Hui He's words, everyone understood what was going on. That was right. Other than a commander-level character taking action personally, how could ordinary people possibly be able to kill the members of the Gray Army as if they were cutting melons and vegetables? It was naturally the White Army's commander, Fang Xinjian. He had transmitted power across space like Hui He had done, and what he was relying on was that silver longsword. Concurrently, Hui He turned to look in Grade's direction and said with a cold snort, "Grade, this is your book of wisdom. Are you just going to look at it like this?" Grade let out a loud laugh, but his eyes were fixed on the Panway sword that was floating before Jessica. His eyes were filled with greed. The Black Army's power came from their greed. With this power, they had the desire to take over everything and own everything. Right now, the Divine Remains equipment, which had never appeared on Earth before, immediately aroused Grade's greed. "It's mine. This longsword is mine." Accompanied by a maniacal laugh, he suddenly dissipated, turning into endless black smoke that appeared before the Panway sword. He then grabbed out with his hand and grabbed onto the Panway sword's hilt. However, at the instant he grabbed onto the sword hilt, Grade saw a pair of eyes. The gaze in the eyes was like sword light, piercing straight into his soul. At the next moment, Grade, who was holding onto the sword's hilt, let out an agonizing cry and retreated 7 steps. With each step he retreated, the black smoke on his body would explode like sparks, revealing his naked figure. He looked at the Panway sword that was still floating slowly in midair with a horrified expression. Chapter 9:27. Everyone present looked at this scene in great astonishment. No one had expected that Grade, who was the fiercest and the craziest among the 13 commanders, would be injured in just one exchange. It seemed that the White Army's new commander, Fang Xinjian, was much more amazing than they had imagined. At the sight of this scene, a hint of solemnity flashed in Hui He's eyes. However, at this moment, how could they possibly back off before the several billion people in the world? Moreover, they would only know the outcome after they fought. After all, both he and Grade had yet to unleash their full powers. Therefore, just as Grade was pushed back by the attack, he also made a move. This time around, he also performed the world abides to the heart. However, its prowess was over 10 times stronger than the world abides to the heart performed by Qin Wang. The wind and clouds stopped moving, and the air became still. Many dust particles froze in midair, and it was as if the pause button had been pressed on everyone and everything. Wherever the gray energy passed by, everything would be sealed up, and the world would come to a standstill. All the movements in the microscopic world seemed to be extremely close to true stillness. The sealed-up space extended out toward the Panwei sword, and a tremendous amount of gray light instantly encompassed the Panwei sword. Seal! As he let out a cold snort, the gray light formed many long gray bandages, wrapping up the Panwei sword from top to bottom. Almost every single one of these death bandages, which were created through microscopic means, had characteristics that surpassed that of aviation materials. They could exist stably in most hellish environments, and even a pulling force of several 100,000 tons would not be able to damage them in the slightest. Then a huge gray coffin descended from the sky, slowly sucking the longsword that was wrapped up by the bandages into it. The interior of the gray coffin was pitch black, as if it was connected to another alternate dimension. Even if one were to use any detection means from modern technology, they would not be able to see through the situation inside. The entire process was as fast as lightning, and it was completed almost in the blink of an eye. By the time everyone reacted, the silver longsword had already been wrapped up by layers of bandages and was being sucked into the coffin inch by inch. As if sensing danger, the entire silver longsword trembled abruptly, wanting to break free from the coffin's suction. He smiled coldly and pushed out his palm. A huge pure gray hand suddenly materialized. The gray hand seemed as if it had real flesh and blood, and each of its veins and blood vessels were extremely exquisite. A majestic power burst out from it, bringing forth strong gales that sent the hall's roof, which weighed over 1,000,000 tons, flying. The palm struck the sword and was about to push it into the coffin. Just then, a myriad of sword light shot out from the Panwei sword. Earlier on, the Panwei sword had only unleashed 1 or 2 streams of sword light, yet they had already caused the Grey Army to be in utter disarray. They found it hard to fend off the attacks. At this moment, when a myriad of sword light flashed simultaneously, a hint of astonishment flashed on Hui's face. Pucci! 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 The death bandage was the first to shatter, turning into dust that floated into the sky. The sword light did not stop there. It directly pierced through the giant gray palm print, as if it had been dismembered by countless sharp blades. The gray palm print exploded into fragments that filled the sky. At the same time, the gray coffin behind it also exploded, turning into fragments that filled the sky. After breaking through Hui's seal in an instant, the myriad of sword light did not stop there. They suddenly gathered into a single point and attacked Hui. Hui let out a furious bellow, and the sealed space of the world abides to the heart contracted abruptly, turning into a gray circle of light that was the size of a basketball and clashed out toward the sword light. As the sealed space of the world abides to the heart shrank, its strength also kept on increasing. When it reached the size of a basketball, almost all the microscopic particles in it had stopped moving, and its temperature reached an unprecedented negative 260 degrees Celsius. It was the zero seal, an ultimate technique that Hui had created after stepping into the microscopic domain. At the next moment, the light pursuit sword's sword light collided fiercely with the zero seal's light circle. Without a sound, the light circle collapsed, and the sword light flashed by, piercing a large hole in the body that Hui had formed. Amidst an agonizing cry, Hui's body shattered abruptly, and endless gray energy dissipated. Then it slowly formed a new body. Right now, He was looking at the Panway sword with a gaze filled with great wariness. Where on earth did this Fang Xinjian come from? That stream of sword light from earlier has an unfathomable understanding toward the world, technology, and truth. Seeing that he was unable to take down Hui He single-handedly, Hui He let out a low bellow, causing the air to tremble. He said to Grade, "Grade, what are you still standing there for? Let's attack together and suppress him." The black air currents that Grade had dissipated earlier had now once again extended out from his body. The terror in his eyes gradually dissipated, replaced by endless greed and desire. Although an unknown power had injured him at the instant he came into contact with the Panway sword and even left behind an extremely horrified emotion in his body, greed was Grade's nature. It was his instinct, something that was engraved into his bones, and it was the cries of countless consciousnesses. Therefore, within a short period of time, the greed in his heart won over that feeling of horror. Moreover, due to the uniqueness of the Panway sword, the greed in his heart was unprecedented. Waves of black chi rose up from the surface of his body like many bubbles, and he seemed to have become stronger once again. His eyes, which were encompassed by the black chi, glared at the silver sword and Jessica. He bellowed as if he had gone mad, "Hand over this sword and the book of wisdom. They're all mine." As he spoke, the black chi swelled up once again, and a myriad of wills bellowed out in void space. Many black souls flew out incessantly from Grade's body and then pounced out toward Jessica. They bellowed loudly, and their eyes were filled with black light. Endless greed and desire appeared in them as if they wanted to engulf everything in this world. These were the greedy souls that Grade had released from his body. Each of these souls was a member of the Black Army. Due to their greedy powers engulfing each other, they had been suppressed in Grade's body all this while. Now that they were released by Grade at one go, it was as if the entire Black Army had descended from the sky. Faced with the overwhelming amount of greedy souls, the Panway sword trembled slightly once again, and a myriad of sword light instantly clashed with the souls. However, this time around, the sword light that could slash through everything was not as effective. Each of the souls bit out greedily toward the sword light that was shooting out toward them. They started to engulf the sword light bit by bit. Seeing that both parties were in a stalemate, Hui He made his move once again. Hui He clenched his right hand abruptly. This simple action of clenching his fist seemed to have absorbed all of the brilliant light in the world into it. A state as if he was in control of the world, and looking down on the world seethed out, causing one to be unable to help but drop to their knees and worship him. Chapter 928. At the next instant, he simply sank his elbows, became one with his waist and horse, and smashed out a punch. However, it brought about a change in the world. The fist's name was domination. Hui He's unrivaled domineering will and ambition to control the world activated the gray energy in the ring, unleashing 200% of its prowess. The 13-colored ring was a power that was activated by one's will to begin with. Previously, Hui He's world to the heart was an application of energy. However, the domination fist was a punch that truly activated the power, condensing the domineering, awe-inspiring, and ambitious aura that Hui He had accumulated over several decades to rule over millions and millions of humans. This was a punch that used pure power to suppress everything in the world that refused to submit. Under this punch, the sword light shattered, no longer able to fend off Hui He. The two surges of power, one gray and one black, completely suppressed the myriad of sword light. They compressed the light circle formed by the sword light inch by inch, suppressing it to a radius of 3 meters. Under everyone's gaze, the gray fist force and the black souls pressed down explosively on the Panway longsword, causing the light sword to only be able to maintain a radius of 3 meters. It was still trembling incessantly as if it would collapse at any moment. It was like an ordinary person who was being pressed down by 2 huge mountains, unable to move at all. At the sight of this scene, the Witch of Trepidation, who had initially maintained an astonished expression, let out a breath. She thought, this Fang Xinjian is really amazing. It's a pity that he wanted to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, but he chose the wrong opponent and underestimated their determination. How can he possibly be a match for He and Grade when they join forces? In the television broadcast studio, the silver-haired female professor, Loretta, sighed and said, "It's true that the White Army's new commander, Fang Xinjian, is stronger than what I had guessed previously. However, this person is obstinate and self-opinionated. He doesn't understand the current situation on Earth. The 1-3 agreement was jointly set by the 13 commanders back then. How can he overturn it alone?" The host asked, "Professor Loretta, as an international relations expert, what do you think the outcome of this meeting will be? Will there be a second war between the armies?" Professor Loretta fell silent for a moment before shaking her head and saying, "That shouldn't be the case. Right now, Earth still has external threat. The 13 commanders also understand that this is definitely not the time for internal strife. This time around, the White Army will be the unlucky ones." Sigh. She sighed and said, "Fang Xinjian has probably brought the entire White Army into the abyss." After hearing Professor Loretta's analysis, countless spectators nodded in agreement. In a manor in the North American continent, Jessica's father watched the content on the television and sat on a chair dejectedly. His face was filled with despair. Beside him, his wife and son were already in a state of panic. The son shouted, "Dad, what should we do? Hurry up and run, what are you still doing here?" Jessica's father shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Escape? Where can we run to? Which part of Earth was not under the control of the army? We can't escape?" Jessica's brother cried, "What's wrong with that? Daddy, I don't want to die. I really don't want to die. The Grey Army won't let us off." In outer space, the Gold Army's leader, Edward, looked coldly at the live broadcast. He let out a soft snort and said, "Idiots." Most of the ordinary people in the hall had retreated a long time ago, leaving behind only the live broadcast camera and a few extraordinary humans. Right now, the gray and black forces pressed down once again, suppressing the sword light to a range of 1 meter and protecting Jessica tightly. At the sight of this scene, He felt that the outcome was already set and was unwilling to expend more energy. Therefore, he said directly, "Fang Xinjian, are you still going to resist? It's impossible for you to be a match for the both of us with your powers alone. You should be proud that you forced the two of us to join forces to take you down." However, while he wanted to conserve his energy and force Fang Xinjian to surrender, Grade would not do this. Dominated by greed and desire, he had no rationality left. "Give me the sword." With a bellow from Grade, a myriad of black souls gushed forth, each of them opening their mouths and engulfing the sword light. Kacha-kacha sounds kept ringing out, and the souls gnawed on the sword light until it trembled and even started to break down. At the sight of this scene, an extremely horrified expression appeared on Jessica's face. However, she still maintained the most basic level of rationality as she recalled Fang Xinjian's instructions to her. "This sword is sufficient to protect your life usually, but if you encounter a dangerous situation..." Jessica lowered her head and put her palms together. Although she looked horrified, she still wore a basic expression of respect. "Darling, please turn around." In that instant, an endless amount of sword light was unleashed from the Panway sword. If it was said that the 1, 2, and then the myriad of sword light earlier could still give one a rough estimate of the number of sword light, then right now, the amount of sword light unleashed by the Panway sword was already uncountable. Right now, the Panway sword was like a sun that had risen up into the sky. Endless sword light was unleashed, forming its glow. It was only at this moment that the Panway sword unleashed the true prowess of the light pursuit sword intense in the sword. Wherever the sword light passed by, everything in the world would evaporate. Grade's greedy dead souls were the first to be affected. The myriad of dead souls dissipated under the piercing of the sword light, melting like snow that had been enveloped by sunlight. Grade let out an agonizing cry, and a large part of his body dissipated as he retreated rapidly. Escape. Right now, there were no longer any desires or greed in Grade's heart. The only thing he had was endless terror. Right now, there was only a single thought in his heart, and that was to escape. He wanted to escape far, far away, so far away that he would never have to see this sword light ever again. Hui's countenance changed. Faced with the gushing sword light, he struck out with his domination fist. However, the domination fist, which had dominated the world and destroyed everything in the world, was crushed into ashes under the myriad of sword light. Hui punched out 9 times consecutively. However, each time his punch came into contact with the sword light, his energy body would collapse and then regenerate. After punching out 9 times consecutively, his energy body collapsed 9 times and finally dissipated into the air completely. All that was left behind was a gray ring that cut across the sky and flew out 1,000 lis away. As for Qin Wang and the Witch of Trepidation, they were completely vaporized the moment they came into contact with the sword light. Their entire physical bodies were struck by the omnipresent photon currents, turning into microscopic particles that dissipated into the world. After the sword light disappeared, within a range of 300 meters, not only had the entire hall disappeared, but over 10 meters of the ground had also been vaporized. With Jessica as the center, there was nothing left within a range of 300 meters. The live broadcast also disappeared for an instant, and then it was switched to the cameras outside the hall. The several billion spectators watched in silence as they saw that there was nothing left before them. They had been completely vaporized, leaving behind only Jessica and the silver longsword. At the next moment, the entire world was shaken. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.